Hey guys, tonight we're tiptoeing into a world dimly lit by gas lamps and candlewick, where judgment lives behind lace curtains and silence carries the weight of scandal. You're in a small town around the year 1900, let's say somewhere in rural Pennsylvania, or maybe on the edge of an English village, where carriages still clatter over cobblestone, and everyone knows your name. And your business. You're 17, maybe 18. Your dress has high collars and tightly cinched waistlines, though not quite tight enough now. You've missed a period, then another. You're no fool, but no one ever told you what to really expect. There were whispers, sure, warnings, but nothing concrete. And now your stomach churns, not from nausea, but from dread. It's a warm dusk. The smell of coal smoke lingers in the air. You step out of the cottage, pretending to fetch water from the pump. It's quiet, except for the distant bark of a dog and a few cicadas complaining from the hedge. You're thinking about how to hide it, tighten the corset, skip meals, pray it's something else. Spoiler, it's not. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always oddly comforting to know who else is drifting off with you tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk slower now because everything feels heavier, and everyone seems to stare just a little longer. Or maybe you're imagining it. Either way, that creeping, prickly sensation that something's not right, it doesn't leave. And in 1900, the consequences of being pregnant before marriage, they weren't just social, they were seismic. The first signs were always physical: morning sickness, fatigue, a sudden distaste for salt pork or pickled onions, small things. But then came the moment when even your thick wool skirts couldn't hide it anymore. By the third or fourth month, the real panic began. You'd start counting backwards. How many Sundays since the barn dance? Did anyone see you walking with him that night? Was there a witness? Because that's what it would come down to. The whispers, the neighbours, your mother's tightening jaw, your father's clenched silence. He'd probably take his pipe outside, muttering words he'd never say in front of you. Not until now. You've crossed some invisible line, and suddenly you're no longer a daughter. You're a disgrace. Remember, this is a time when a woman's entire worth could be summed up in one word: respectable. And you, my dear, are about to lose that word forever. There were no maternity leave policies, no support groups, no TikToks from girls holding up positive tests and smiling nervously at the camera. There was just shame. Quiet, crushing shame. Families responded in various ways. Some flew into fury, screaming matches, threats, maybe even being locked in your room. Others went deathly quiet, packing your bags before you could explain. They'd send you away to an aunt who may or may not exist. If you were lucky, they'd send you with some money and a promise to write. If you were unlucky, they'd never mention your name again. And it wasn't just your family. Even the baker's wife would start giving you that look. The one where her smile never quite touches her eyes. Your childhood friends would avoid you, unsure whether to offer comfort or keep their distance. After all, their mothers had warned them about girls like you. Here's where the cruel irony kicks in. The man involved, he's fine. He's probably still at his job, or finishing school, or riding his bicycle down Main Street without a single person whispering. That double standard? Oh, it was alive and well. In fact, it thrived. Historians still argue whether this widespread blame on women was a deliberate form of control or simply the result of centuries of institutionalized patriarchy. Either way, the result was the same. You bore the burden alone. And here's a quirky little tidbit. In some small towns, local shops quietly sold pennyroyal or other herbal concoctions said to bring on your cycle, unofficial code for attempting an early abortion. They didn't advertise it, of course, but the ladies at the counter knew what you were asking for. Whether they worked or not, well, that's another gamble entirely, and a dangerous one. You'd probably try to carry on like nothing's wrong, helping with chores, attending church, nodding politely to Reverend Collins as he preached about purity. But each time someone mentioned marriage, you'd wince just a little. Each time a neighbor mentioned babies, your stomach would twist for more than one reason. Sometimes, just sometimes, a close friend would notice and pull you aside. "Is it him?" she'd ask, barely above a whisper. And depending on who she was, she might offer a hug. Or tell someone else, or both, because secrets never stayed secret for long. You'd find yourself up at night, staring at the ceiling beams, listening to the floorboards creak under someone's restless steps, maybe your mother's, maybe your own, and wondering again and again, what now? In that moment, you're not just scared, you're grieving for the version of your life that now feels forever out of reach. No more wedding with lace gloves and fresh daisies, no more daydreams about white picket fences and Sunday picnics, just this heavy, growing truth inside you and a future that's already been rewritten in permanent ink. And the worst part? It isn't the judgment or even the fear. It's the silence, the long, aching silence that wraps around you like a too tight shawl, making it hard to breathe. Still you trudge forward night after night, waiting for the day someone decides what to do with you. Because in 1900 the girl didn't get to decide. You wake up before the rooster even bothers to crow. The quilt is bunched at your feet, the chamber is cold, and there's already a low murmur in the kitchen downstairs. You pull your shawl tight around your shoulders and tiptoe past your siblings' door, because even now you haven't told them, especially not them. Downstairs, your mother is standing over a pot of oats like she's been up all night. Maybe she has. She doesn't look at you, she doesn't offer a greeting. She just says, flatly, "Eat." You do, quietly, slowly, and then she says it. "Your father and I have spoken. We'll be sending you to your Aunt Miriam." Aunt Miriam, who lives 6 towns over and hasn't visited in 5 years. Aunt Miriam, who was whispered to have once been in trouble herself. Aunt Miriam, who lives alone, no husband, no children, just a house with too many curtains and too little light. You don't argue, you don't have a say. In 1900, girls didn't negotiate their punishment, they packed their bags. The carriage is arranged by that evening. You're told to write your cousins and say you're helping your aunt recover from illness. Convenient, isn't it? How everyone suddenly falls ill when a girl starts showing. And when you leave, you do so in silence. No goodbye party, no handkerchief waved from the porch, just you, your trunk, and a gnawing pit in your stomach that no amount of ginger root tea is going to settle. The trip is long. Horseshoes clack against dirt roads. A man with a wide-brimmed hat drives you without much interest. He doesn't ask questions and you don't offer any, but in your lap you clutch a small paper-wrapped bundle, a few letters, some sewing needles, and your grandmother's cross, because even if no one else is looking out for you, you'd like to think she still is. Aunt Miriam meets you at the door. She doesn't say hello, she just takes your coat, looks at your stomach and says, "Upstairs, second door on the left." And just like that, your new life begins. Your room is sparse. A basin of water, a narrow bed, one cracked window that lets in barely any light. The wallpaper is peeling in places, but not enough to distract you from the ache in your back or the questions in your head. What happens now? Do I keep the baby? Will I ever go back home? Does anyone miss me? Does he miss me? You want to write him, but you don't know if the letter would be returned, unopened, or worse, opened by his mother or his fiancé. You stay quiet. Aunt Miriam brings your meals. She speaks only when necessary, and even then, it's clipped. She doesn't ask about the father. She doesn't ask what you want. But one day, when you're folding laundry, you ask her why she never married. She doesn't answer. Just stares at the snow through the window for a long time and mutters, "Didn't work out." That's the most human thing she's said so far. As the weeks go on, you learn the routine. You help with the housework. You stay inside. If a neighbor visits, you're to stay upstairs and pretend you're not there. You are a phantom now, shelved like last winter's seed catalogues. But here's where things get strangely organized. Many towns had entire systems, unofficial ones, just for girls like you. There were directories of so-called safe homes, places run by women with stern buns and even sterner moral codes where girls could wait out the shame. Some were genuinely supportive, others felt more like punishment. Historians still argue whether these institutions were meant to rehabilitate or hide. Some even had contracts the girls had to sign, promising they'd never try to contact the child if placed for adoption. No last hugs, no final goodbyes, just gone. A quirky little fringe detail. In some towns, stalk houses were real. Not whimsical little cottages with painted birds. No, actual private homes marked with a subtle carving or symbol, known only to those in the know. These acted as makeshift shelters or handoff points for women giving birth in secret. It's the kind of thing straight out of a sad novel and yet utterly real. You aren't taken to one of those, not yet. For now, your aunt's house is prison, and purgatory rolled into one. Your belly grows, so does the silence. Sometimes you think you feel the baby kick, sometimes you hope you imagined it, and sometimes when you're scrubbing the floor or peeling potatoes, you feel tears spill down your cheeks before you realize you've started crying. Aunt Miriam catches you once. She says nothing, but that evening she places a piece of chocolate on your nightstand. It's not forgiveness, it's not love, but it's something. One day you ask to go for a walk. She hesitates, then nods. You're far enough along now that hiding the bump is impossible, but you bundle in a shawl and go. The air is cold and dry. Snow crunches under your boots. You pass a woman walking her dog. She looks at your stomach, then at your face, then quickly looks away. You realize something then. It doesn't matter where you go. The look is the same. That look of, I know what you did. But what did you do? Loved someone? Trusted someone? Believed him when he said he'd marry you? The sin, you realize, wasn't the act. It was believing you had the right to choose who touched your body and when. And for that, the whole world has closed its door. When you return, Aunt Miriam is waiting at the window. For the first time, she says your name. You sit by the fire that night and shell peas in silence. It's not much. But for now, it's home. The morning starts with pain, not the kind in your back or feet, but in your thoughts. You've been counting weeks. The baby is due in maybe 6, maybe 5. It's hard to say. Time blurs in a house like this. The same potatoes, the same fire, the same shadows stretching across the floorboards as the sun sets behind the bare trees. Aunt Miriam knocks twice before entering, carrying a folded paper. They'll take you next Thursday, she says. You'll need a bag. You don't ask who they are. You already know. It's not a hospital. It's not even a doctor's home. It's what they call a lying-in home. A place for girls like you, unwed, swollen, invisible. You nod. You don't cry. Not now. You'll save that for later. The following Thursday, another carriage comes. It's a smaller one this time, with frosted windows and a driver who avoids eye contact. He helps you into the seat, then clicks the reins. You pass farms, white fences, frozen rivers, but you don't really see them. All you see is the looming grey house at the end of the road. The home is larger than you expected, bricks the colour of dried blood, ivy clawing at the windows. You walk up the steps slowly, carrying a bag with your name stitched into the lining. Your real name, though it won't be used here. Inside, a tall woman with sharp eyebrows and an even sharper voice greets you. She wears all black, like she's permanently in mourning. Maybe she is. We don't do drama, she says before even asking your name. We do chores and we do quiet. You nod. You're used to rules by now. The girls here are ghosts, pale, silent, their eyes downcast. You're assigned a room with another girl. Sarah, she whispers. She's maybe 16. She was sent from a church-run school when her uniform stopped fitting. I miss music, she tells you one night. I used to sing in choir, can't anymore. They say it might upset the others. You're not sure whether to laugh or cry at that. Your days fall into rhythm, morning cleaning, afternoon knitting, evening soup. You're not allowed outside, you're not allowed to ask questions. And when someone goes into labour, they simply disappear for a day, then reappear the next, looking hollowed out, stitched up, and changed. Historians still debate whether these homes were sanctuaries or prisons. Some had kind staff and real care, others, like this one, felt more like punishment centres wrapped in starched linen. The idea was simple: remove the girl from society, erase the scandal, then return her cleaned up, empty-handed and silent. There were no baby showers, no name painting on the walls, no cooing grandmothers with soft knitting needles, just long corridors that smelled like antiseptic and old guilt. A fringe fact for you: some of these homes had nurseries, but not the kind you'd imagine. Babies were lined in rows, their mothers allowed to see them maybe once or twice before being asked to sign away rights with shaking hands. The papers used phrases like "for the child's good" or "to protect the family's reputation." But rarely did they ask the mother what she wanted. And even if they did, she wouldn't have known what to say. No one had prepared her for this. One afternoon, you hear crying. Real, sharp, newborn crying. The girl in the next room, Elizabeth, has delivered. But you never see the baby. By morning, she's gone. Sarah leans in that night and whispers. They say she tried to run, that she wanted to keep the child. They say someone stopped her. You don't ask who. You don't want to know. Weeks pass. You knit. You fold linens. You eat bread with the same pale jam every day. You dream of going home, though you no longer remember what home feels like. And then, one morning, you feel it. Real pain. It starts small, like cramps, then stronger, deeper. You gasp. The matron appears. She doesn't smile, just nods and motions to the stairs. You're led to a small room, dimly lit, walls scrubbed clean. A midwife waits. She's older, gentler, worn but kind. She helps you onto the table, tells you to breathe. The labour is long, 12 hours, maybe more. You bite the sheet. You sob. You beg. No one tells you it's normal. No one holds your hand. Except the midwife, once, briefly, during a particularly sharp contraction. Her grip is warm and steady, like she's anchoring you to the earth. Finally, the baby comes. It's a girl. You don't get to hold her. They take her, clean her, wrap her. Someone scribbles on a clipboard. You're told to rest. You don't. You lie awake all night, staring at the ceiling, your body aching, your heart a hollow drum. The next morning, you ask to see her. The matron frowns. That's not advisable. You ask again. They allow 5 minutes. She's tiny, pink. Her fists are clenched like she's already bracing for this world. You whisper a name you've never said out loud, Clara. But they don't write it down. They take her away. The next day, you're told to sign a form. You hesitate. Your hand trembles, but you sign, because what else can you do? The train ticket is placed into your hand. You're going back to Aunt Miriam's, back to silence, back to pretending nothing happened. As you leave, Sarah hugs you. Tight, fierce. Don't forget her, she whispers. You won't? But in 1900, girls didn't get to remember out loud. They carried the silence instead. The train rocks gently as you lean your head against the window, watching trees blur past in brown and white streaks. It's early spring now. Snow is melting in clumps along the tracks. Your body is sore in places you didn't know could ache. But it's your mind that feels worse. Quiet, raw, like someone swept it clean but left the pain behind. No one speaks to you. You sit in the corner, bundled in your aunt's old coat, a little too tight across the chest now. In your lap, a satchel. Inside it, a single scrap of cloth, a bonnet from the lying-in home. You took it when no one was looking. You don't even know if it was hers. But it's yours now, proof that she existed. The station near Aunt Miriam's town is smaller than you remembered. There's a new post office, maybe, the same horse hitch. You see a man carrying a bundle of newspapers under one arm. You wonder if your name's ever appeared in one. Hopefully not. Aunt Miriam meets you at the platform. She looks thinner, older. She doesn't smile, but she does nod. And when she takes your bag, she takes your hand too, for just a moment. You walk back in silence. Inside the house, not much has changed. The wallpaper is still peeling. The same brass lamp flickers in the hallway. The same teacup with the chipped rim sits beside your bed. But you're not the same. You walk slower now. You speak less. and when you sleep, you sometimes wake up clutching your chest, unsure whether it's a dream or a memory pulling you out of sleep. The next few days are quiet. Aunt Miriam doesn't ask questions. She lets you rest. She even brings you tea one night, mint, strong, her way of saying something without words. And then one morning, she says, "You'll need to go home soon." Home. That word stings a bit. Home means your parents, the town, the neighbours, the ones who haven't seen you in nearly 7 months. What will they say? What will they see? You think of Sarah, you think of Clara, you press the scrap of bonnet cloth between your fingers until your knuckles go white. Aunt Miriam sees you hesitate. "You don't have to talk about it," she says, "but you can." And so you do, for the first time, haltingly, quietly. You tell her about the pain, about the silence, about how the baby looked up at you once, and then never again. Aunt Miriam listens. She doesn't interrupt, and when you finish, she simply says, "It doesn't get easier, but you learn to carry it." She's speaking from experience. You know that now. The next day, she gives you a new dress. It's grey, modest, but clean. She's taken in the waist, let out the seams at the chest. She's been preparing for this. You pack your things again, less this time. No illusions, no daydreams. Just your bonnet scrap and your grandmother's cross. The carriage that picks you up is driven by the same man who took you to the train months ago. He nods when he sees you, eyes flicking to your face, then away. You don't look the same, and he knows it. Back home, the garden is overgrown. Your mother meets you at the door. She doesn't say much, just, "Dinner's in an hour." Your father doesn't look up from his newspaper. You eat quietly. No one mentions the missing months. No one mentions the baby. But the house feels heavier now, like everyone's walking around the edge of something fragile, hoping it doesn't crack. That night, in your old room, you lie awake. Everything looks the same. Same embroidered pillowcase, same water jug on the side table, but it all feels foreign now, smaller. You've changed, but the room hasn't, like trying to wear a child's dress after a growth spurt. You get up and walk to the window. The moonlight spills across the lawn. The same swing still hangs from the tree. You used to push your little brother on that swing. Now he won't look you in the eye. Over the following days, life resumes technically. You help with chores, you go to the market, you sit in church on Sundays. The pew creaks under your weight like it always did, but the air feels different now, tighter. The town hasn't forgotten, but they won't say it to your face. They just watch, quietly, like judges with invisible gavels. And then comes the moment you dread, the first time you run into him. He's at the feed store, wearing a new hat, laughing with a friend. He sees you. His face freezes, and then he turns away. No apology, no explanation, just silence. You feel your cheeks burn, not from shame, but from something sharper. Rage, maybe, because he's still welcome, he's still whole. And you're the one who disappeared, who returned, changed, who lives in lowercase now like a whisper. Historians still argue whether communities genuinely believed they were protecting morality by shunning unwed mothers, or if it was simply easier than facing their own failures to educate, support, or empathize. But in your case, the result is the same. You trudge home. You chop wood. You braid your sister's hair. You keep moving, because what else can you do? There's a strange strength in survival, a kind of quiet armor, no medals, no parades, just waking up each day and deciding not to disappear. And you do that, day after day, until the whispers fade, not because they've stopped, but because you've learned to walk through them like fog. Your hands are chapped from hanging laundry. The soap dries your skin until it flakes at the knuckles. You don't complain. You never do these days. Complaining feels like a luxury, something for people who don't have to prove they deserve to exist in every room they enter. You fall into a rhythm of sorts. Wake early, boil water, feed the chickens, answer your mother with "yes, Mom," and "I'll see to it." The baby's name is never spoken, not once, not even by accident. But you speak it silently to yourself sometimes, just to keep it real, just to keep her real. Clara. Some nights you stare at the ceiling and trace out the letters. Other nights you press your fingers to the locket you've stuffed the bonnet fabric into and try to remember the weight of her, though you never really got to hold her long enough. One evening you're summoned to the parlour. Your father clears his throat, still not meeting your eyes. "We've had a letter," he says. "The deacon's boy, Thomas, he's expressed interest." You blink. "In what?" Your mother's lips purse. "In marrying you." The words hit like a dropped skillet. You sit very still. This wasn't a question. This is a rescue mission disguised as a proposal. You remember Thomas, tall, quiet, always sat 2 pews ahead of you at church, carried a book under his arm, even to Sunday potlucks. He once told you cows can recognize human faces and remember them for years. You didn't believe him at the time. Now you think maybe he's right. Your parents don't say it, but you know what this is. A second chance. A chance to become respectable again. To erase the whispered past with a white dress and a new surname. You ask if he knows. Your mother hesitates. "We told him enough," which likely means not much. You nod slowly. "Can I think about it?" There's a pause, and then your father surprises you. "Of course." That night you walk to the edge of the property, past the fence where the wildflowers grow in spring. The ground crunches under your boots. The air smells like ash and moss. You think about Thomas, about his quiet voice, about his cow facts, about whether a man like that could love a girl with this kind of history, or whether he simply wants to save her. Historians still debate whether these marriages were acts of compassion, pressure, or quiet coercion. Some ended in true partnership. Others were simply transactions, shame-swapped for survival. A quirky footnote: in some regions, families actually staged mock weddings for unwed pregnant daughters, ceremonies held in secret or without full legal standing, just to hush the scandal and present a story for the neighbours. The illusion of virtue was often deemed more important than the reality. You don't want illusion. You've had enough of those. You meet with Thomas 2 days later on the church steps. He's dressed neatly, nervous. He doesn't reach for your hand, and you're grateful. "I know a little," he says. "Not everything, but I know it wasn't your fault." You don't reply. He clears his throat. "I don't expect anything. I just thought maybe you'd want a fresh start." You look at him. His face is open, honest. Scared, maybe, like he's offering something fragile he's not sure you'll take. And in that moment you don't see salvation. You see a window, small, slightly cracked, but letting in light. You nod. Maybe. The wedding is small. No lace, no harpist, just a borrowed dress and a lemon cake from the neighbour who still won't look you in the eye. You hold Thomas's hand and say the words. It feels strange not to cry. After the ceremony, someone claps you on the back and says, "Well, it's all behind you now." You smile and nod, but it's not behind you. It's just folded, carefully, and stored somewhere deeper. You move into a modest cottage with Thomas. It smells like pine and old books. He has a dog, a scruffy thing that hates thunder and loves shoes. You laugh when it eats your slipper. You haven't laughed in months. There's a softness to him. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't pry. He just brings you tea when you're quiet and offers to walk with you when the world feels too loud. One evening, you find a letter tucked into a drawer, not addressed, just a note. "I know you've been hurt. I don't need to know how. I just want you to know you're safe now." Tea. It makes you cry, finally, but this time not from grief, from relief. You still think of Clara every day, but the ache becomes less jagged, like sea glass smoothed by time. Some nights you whisper her name into the dark, and sometimes, though rarely, you imagine writing to her, telling her about the dog, the lemon cake, the man who makes room for her memory, even if he never knew her name. Because maybe, in some quiet way, that's enough. The cottage is modest, but it breathes. It lets in light through tall windows that rattle in the wind. and the floorboards creak just enough to feel lived in. You learn their patterns, where to step softly in the morning, which board near the hearth always complains. These small things become your routine, your rhythm, and for now, that's enough. Thomas rises early, always, before the rooster even clears his throat. You hear him stoke the fire, then start the kettle. He lets you sleep. When you do rise, there's usually bread to toast and fresh tea steeping on the sill. These quiet kindnesses, he never points them out, and you never ask for them. But they accumulate like little notes in the margin of your life, telling you you're allowed to begin again. Still, you never forget. Clara is never far. Her absence lives in your ribs like a sigh that never fully leaves. There are days when you don't think about her at all, and then you feel guilty for that. There are days when everything reminds you, the cry of a baby in town, the smell of wool soap, a lullaby your mother once hummed that now makes your chest ache. Historians still argue whether women in your position, those who lost children through force or shame, were victims of social structure or silent revolutionaries reshaping family in hidden ways. But one thing is clear, they never truly forgot. They simply learned to carry memory like a secret stone in the pocket. You keep yours tucked away. Sometimes you unfold it, look at it, press it against your chest. Other times you just let it be. Thomas never asks. But one late evening in early autumn, you're sitting on the porch while the leaves skitter across the yard. He brings you a blanket and sits beside you. Doesn't speak at first, then says, "Would you ever want to talk about her?" It takes a moment to realize who he means. You glance sideways. He's watching the trees, not you. You wrap the blanket tighter. "Not yet," you whisper. He nods. "When you're ready." And then he takes your hand, not possessively, not to claim, but to anchor. And you let him. There's comfort you find in small things. In drying herbs in the kitchen, in writing a grocery list with a stubby pencil, in waking to the sound of birds instead of silence. You take in mending work from the town, hemming skirts, repairing aprons, stitching name tags into school uniforms. The rhythm of the needle calms your nerves. Each stitch is control, order, something that obeys your hands when so much else hasn't. You're good at it. People start leaving notes with their bundles. "Thank you kindly." "Lovely work." "Bless your hands." And occasionally the glances soften. A neighbour lingers longer at your gate. A child waves. A mother asks if you can teach her daughter to sew. The tide is turning just a little. One afternoon you visit the market. A woman behind the counter eyes you, hesitates, then says, "You still have that blue fabric from last spring? I think I'm ready to make curtains." It's such a small sentence, so innocuous, but you feel it. You've been folded back into the fabric of the town, not celebrated perhaps, but no longer excluded. A quirky little truth. In some towns, the unwed mother who returned respectably, through marriage, hard work, or just time, could eventually rise to a kind of quiet esteem. Not everyone would say it aloud, but people noticed. People respected survival, even if they never acknowledged the reason for it. Still, there are lines you'll never cross again, invitations you'll never receive, rooms you'll never fully be welcome in. But you stop needing those rooms. Instead, you build your own. You and Thomas plant a small vegetable garden in spring. It's messy, mostly carrots and too much mint. But it grows. And one day, while pulling weeds near the fence, you find yourself humming. A tune you don't recognize, maybe one you made up, maybe one Clara would have liked. You freeze when you realize you're thinking of her without crying. That night, you sit at the kitchen table and write a letter. "Dear Clara, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know where you are, but I think of you every day. I hope you're warm. I hope someone sings to you. I hope you grow wild and kind and full of questions. I miss you, and I'm okay now. Love, your mother." You don't send it, of course not, but you fold it gently, wrap it in the bonnet cloth, and place it in the drawer next to your sewing needles. It's enough to have written it. The next morning, you rise early, before Thomas even. You step outside as the fog curls across the field, your shawl wrapped tight, breath puffing in little clouds. There's frost on the window pane, but the sun is rising behind it. You feel it on your face. And for the first time in a long time, you smile without guilt. Because healing isn't forgetting, it's remembering, and still going forward. You've lived in the cottage for nearly a year now, and your footsteps no longer echo. The house knows you. It holds your weight differently. You know where the wind slips in through the windows, where the floorboard in the pantry groans if you step too far to the left. You've put wildflowers in the kitchen vase so often that the dog no longer tries to eat them. Well, not as often. One afternoon, a knock comes at the door. Not the kind that rushes or hesitates, but the kind that arrives with purpose. You wipe your hands on your apron and open it to find a young woman standing there, barely out of girlhood, hat pulled low, cheeks flushed, fingers clenched tightly around a folded paper. She looks like someone trying not to fall apart. You know that look? She asks for you by name. Not your old name, the one the town whispered, but the one you use now. The name you signed on marriage papers and grocery orders, Mrs. Thomas Everett. You say yes. She holds out the paper. My aunt said you might help. I was told you understand. You take the note with slow fingers. You don't open it right away. Instead, you ask if she's eaten. She hasn't. So you make tea, you slice bread, you warm soup. And while the kettle whistles softly in the background, she tells you everything. You listen. You don't interrupt. You don't gasp or judge. You've heard these words before, in your own voice, in your own head, years ago now, but still so vivid it feels like a second skin. She finishes her story with a whisper. I don't know what to do. You reach for her hand. That's okay, you say. You don't have to know today. Because you remember what it felt like to have no choices, no kindness, no space to say what hurt and what didn't. And now here you are, a little older, a little stronger, and finally in a place where you can be what you once needed. Historians still debate whether these quiet support networks between women were acts of rebellion or simple compassion, but either way, they mattered. They created ripples in a world that liked still water, and sometimes those ripples became waves, a quirky detail. In some towns, women like you became unofficial fixers. People would send girls to your door with only a name and a satchel, no official title, no office, just the understanding that you knew what to do. You never thought that would be you, but now it is. Over the next few days, you help the girl, her name is Lily, settle into the spare room. You lend her dresses that are loose and forgiving. You teach her to make broth and stitch seams. You don't rush her to decide what comes next. Thomas, as always, is quiet and kind. He puts a chair by the hearth for her and makes sure the dog doesn't eat her slippers either. One evening, Lily asks, "Did you ever wonder what happened to, her?" You know who she means. You nod. Every day. Does it ever stop hurting? You consider. It softens, you say. It doesn't go away, but you learn how to live beside it. She nods slowly, like she's trying to understand what that might feel like. Spring returns. The garden begins to push up pale green shoots. You plant herbs and carrots again. This time, Lily helps. She hums while she works. You don't know the tune, but it's soft and steady. One afternoon, a letter arrives in the post. You recognize the handwriting. Aunt Miriam. You open it with care. "Dearest, a girl from town has been asking after you. Her niece is in trouble. I said you might write or visit. If you feel up to it. Warmly, M." You smile. Small, quiet. The way people smile when they realize they've become the person someone else can trust. You write back that evening. As the sun dips low and the fields glow golden, you walk out to the porch. Lily follows, slower now. She's starting to show. Just a little, but enough to make her walk with a hand resting gently on her belly. You sit together in silence. Eventually she says, "Thank you for not turning me away." You turn toward her. "I wouldn't dare," you say. Someone once didn't turn me away either. You remember that piece of chocolate Aunt Miriam left on your nightstand? The one gesture in a house of hard edges. It wasn't much, but it planted something. And now, here you are, offering the same. Because maybe that's how healing moves, hand to hand, story to story, seed to seed. The world hasn't changed much, not yet. Girls still disappear, still come back, changed, still live with silence, stitched into their seams. But in this tiny house with wild mint and bread cooling on the window ledge, something has shifted. You no longer just survive, you guide, you hold space, and without even realizing it, you've become something rare, a refuge. The days stretch longer now, and the light clings to the windows well past supper. You've started leaving them open in the afternoons, letting the air wander through the cottage, carrying with it the scents of earth, wood smoke, and the last of the apple blossoms. The breeze moves the curtains gently, like a hand brushing hair from your forehead. Lily is settling in. She no longer startles at every sound. Her shoulders, once rigid, now dip slightly when she laughs, which she does from time to time. The dog adores her. He's taken to curling at her feet in the evenings, nosing her belly like he knows there's something important growing in there. She bakes now, not well, mind you. Her first bread came out like a stone. Thomas tapped it and asked if it was for roofing, but you all laughed, and that laughter felt like warmth curling around the table. Each day, Lily learns more: how to patch socks, how to preserve tomatoes, how to balance grief and hope in the same breath. You never once ask her what she plans to do with the baby. She hasn't decided. You told her she doesn't have to, not yet. The world can wait. And you mean it. Historians still argue whether women helping women in domestic spaces like yours constituted resistance or mere necessity. But you've lived it, and you know it's both. Sometimes resistance is simply saying, you're safe here, in a world that wants her to disappear. One morning, a girl from town appears at your gate. Not Lily this time. Another, red braid, barely 16. She has a torn hem and a bruise just starting to yellow at her cheekbone. She doesn't speak, just hands you a folded piece of paper. There's no signature, just one sentence. She has nowhere else. You don't need more than that. You bring her inside. Thomas helps fix the hem. Lily brings tea. You lay out a fresh set of clothes, and when the girl finally speaks, her voice is barely a whisper. I thought you'd turn me away. You smile gently. That's not what we do here. The room you used to sew in becomes a sleeping corner. The parlour now houses extra blankets and borrowed books. You hang curtains, make tea in bulk, mend more buttons than you ever thought possible. The cottage becomes a haven, not by intention, but by need. The town notices, of course. People talk. Some are kind, some are not. A woman at market scoffs under her breath, calls it the house of the fallen. You raise an eyebrow. Better to fall than to push, you say, and she hasn't spoken to you since. But others, quietly, discreetly, start sending girls your way. A cousin, a maid. A daughter who got in trouble. Each one with her own story, her own fear, her own little bundle of hope or heartbreak tucked under her coat. You don't turn them away. You remember what it felt like. Each girl who passes through the cottage leaves something behind: a crocheted scarf, a pressed flower, a drawing tucked between recipe pages, and though you don't mark it aloud, you keep each one. They're fragments of lives that brushed against yours, testaments to survival. One evening, after supper, Lily sits beside you with a piece of paper in her lap. I wrote a name, she says, for the baby. You pause, let her continue. Clara, she says quietly. I hope that's okay. Your chest stings in the best way. You don't cry. Not this time. But you reach over and hold her hand for a long while. The name, reborn. Not a replacement, never that, but a circle quietly closing, a thread pulled through time. She smiles. I wanted her to be named after someone strong. Then she'll grow up well, you say, and you mean it. You go to bed that night and dream of two girls in a field, both with ribbons in their hair and soil on their knees. They laugh and run and don't look back. The next morning, you wake to the smell of bread. Lily's latest attempt. This one smells edible. A success. You grin into your pillow before rising. Thomas is already up, washing his hands in the basin. "She's getting good at that," he says. "Soon she'll outbake you." I'd like to see her try. There's laughter in your voice now. It comes easier. Later that week, another girl arrives. Then another. One stays only a few days. Another returns months later, this time with a toddler on her hip and a smile that says, "I made it." And so the cycle continues, a quirky footnote from the time. In some places, women who ran informal homes like yours were written about in local folklore, not as saints or sinners, but as keepers of keys, literal and metaphorical. They were said to hold space for other women's truths and to protect stories no one else dared remember. You never thought you'd be one of them. But maybe you are. Because each evening you light a lamp in the window. Just one, small, flickering. Enough for someone out there, scared, tired, unsure, to see and know. Here they will not be turned away. Here they can rest and heal and begin again. The lamp in your window becomes a quiet signal, nothing official of course, but word travels. Girls arrive without announcements now, sometimes in the rain, sometimes at dusk, once even on Christmas Eve. Always with that same look in their eyes, part hunted, part hopeful. You begin keeping a spare kettle warm. You've added hooks by the door for cloaks, a little shelf for boots, and a drawer full of donated mittens that no one claims. The front room, once meant for guests who never came, is now a refuge of quilts and whispered stories told only in the soft space between exhaustion and sleep. You didn't plan this life, but here it is, and you're good at it. Even the dog knows the rhythm now. He greets new arrivals with a sniff and then plops nearby as if to say, "You're safe. You can sit here, I've saved a warm spot." Sometimes Thomas builds a small fire in the garden and invites the girls to sit under the stars. They sip tea from chipped mugs and say very little. It's not what's spoken that matters, it's what they're allowed to not say. And you listen to everything, the pauses, the sighs, the names whispered for the first time aloud. Historians still argue whether this kind of work, unofficial, unpaid, uncelebrated, should be considered part of the women's rights movement. Some say yes, that any act of care in defiance of judgment is political. Others say no, that true change only came with policy, with protest signs and picket lines, but sitting there with girls curled around tea and threadbare pillows, you don't think about movements, you think about moments, because those are what truly shift the world. A girl named Maren arrives in spring. She's a little older than the others, maybe 20, wears her grief like armor, doesn't speak for 2 days, but she works hard, chops wood, cleans gutters, fixes a chair that's been wobbly since last harvest. One evening, she says quietly, "I didn't want to live." You nod, not in surprise, just in recognition. "But I came here," she adds, and the silence didn't scare me. That may be the highest praise you've ever received. A fringe tidbit from 1900. In certain rural areas, women created birthing circles, informal groups where mothers, widows and unwed girls supported one another during pregnancies. No records, no certificates, just hands held in pain, lullabies hummed in candlelight, babies caught by people who knew them by name. You think about that sometimes, how history often tries to forget what women remembered together. Maren becomes your right hand, quiet but steady. When Lily goes into labor, it's Maren who prepares the towels, it's Maren who boils water, it's Maren who lights the second lamp. Yes, by now there are 2, because one day a girl came knocking and said, "I thought 1 light meant the door was open, but 2 meant you had room." You never said that, but it feels right. Lily's labor is long. The house falls into a hush. You hear the clock ticking. You hear the dog pacing. You hear the world hold its breath. Then at dawn, you hear a cry. Tiny, new, fierce, You press a hand to your chest. You don't cry, not exactly, but your throat catches in that way you've come to know too well. You let Maren bring you into the room once the dust settles. Lily is pale, but smiling, her arms wrapped tight around a bundle with a pink cap. "She's here," she says. "She's really here." You kneel beside the bed. Lily looks at you with soft, glistening eyes. "I still want to name her Clara, if that's okay." You place a hand over hers. "It's more than okay." You stay beside them as the morning grows bright. Later that day, the girls gather around to see the baby. There's laughter, a few jokes about the shape of her nose, and bets about whose singing she'll tolerate first. Even Thomas, normally cautious around newborns, holds her for a minute, arms stiff, face terrified, but smiling all the same. And in that moment, the cottage feels full in the best way, like a story closing its chapter, but promising another one just around the corner. You step outside, letting the spring breeze kiss your cheeks. The second lamp flickers beside you, and for the first time since your own baby was taken, you feel something settle inside you. Not closure, not quite, but peace. The kind of peace that doesn't erase grief but wraps it in warmth. You reach up, adjust the wick, and whisper to the wind, "She made it. They're making it." And so am I. The days after Clara's birth are slow and golden, the kind that seem to shimmer with quiet purpose, like a page left open in the sun. The house smells of warm bread and talcum powder. You walk softly now, not because the baby will wake, but because it feels like a reverent thing to do. This is sacred ground. Lily glows in that new mother way, exhausted, tender, and fiercely protective. She keeps Clara close, swaddled tight, tucked against her chest, even when she naps. Her eyes stay on the baby like she's trying to memorize every blink, every sigh. And maybe she is, because she knows how close she came to not having this. You remember the ache of empty arms, so you give her space and time and more space. You bring her broth and tea. You teach her how to wrap cloth diapers, how to tell a colic cry from a tired one. She listens, she learns, and when Clara coos just once, high and sweet, Lily breaks into tears that don't stop for a full hour. You hold her hand the whole time. Thomas built a cradle, quietly. No fuss. You came into the kitchen one morning, and there it was, tucked near the hearth, sanded smooth, lined with flannel. He just shrugged. Figured she needed a place to rest. "She's got arms for that," you said. He nodded. "And when those arms get tired, because even good arms need rest, Maren has taken to singing while she cooks. Her voice is surprisingly soft, like wind through corn stalks." One of the girls said it reminded her of her mother. Maren didn't speak for a full minute after that, but later she left a slice of apple tart on the girl's pillow. That's how you say thank you when the words catch in your throat. You start writing again. Not letters, not really. Just small observations in a notebook. Sentences like, "Today, Clara smiled for the first time. At the dog. I forgot what silence felt like without sorrow in it. There's power in making soup for someone who's forgotten how to eat." Historians still debate whether women in homes like yours were healers or rebels, because those were the only boxes history had room for. But maybe you're neither, or both. Maybe you're something else entirely, a living archive of survival, a gentle, stubborn refusal to let sorrow have the last word. A quirky tidbit for you. In some regions in 1900, women who had once given birth out of wedlock were forbidden from acting as godmothers to children in the church. It was meant to preserve moral order. But what actually happened? In many cases, girls and women chose them as godmothers anyway, quietly, without official blessing. Because who better to walk beside a child than someone who had learned how to love one even when the world told her not to? One evening, Lily asks you to hold Clara while she bathes. You do. You sit in the rocking chair, the baby bundled against your chest, her soft breath feathering against your collarbone. She smells like milk and lavender soap. Her fingers curl and uncurl as she dreams. You rock gently, not with urgency, just with rhythm, the same motion your body remembers, even after all these years. And as you hold her, you close your eyes and whisper Clara's name. You're Clara. Not aloud, just enough for your bones to feel it. A thread connects them. Not one the world can see, but it's there. You know it. And in that moment, it hums with warmth. Maren watches from the doorway. You look like you were made for that. You smile, not because it's true, but because it's kind. The truth is, you were unmade by it once, and then remade, slowly, carefully, stitch by stitch. The girls bake cookies the next day, burnt on the bottom, raw in the middle, but you all eat them anyway, dipping them in milk and pretending you love the crunch. Laughter fills the house. Even the dog gets a bite. At supper, Thomas raises his glass, not wine, just cider, and says, "To beginnings and middles, and all the messy bits in between." You all clink mismatched mugs, and for the first time in years, you let yourself believe that something new can grow alongside everything you've lost, not instead of, not despite, but with. That night, you tuck the girls in, check the cradle, cover the fire, and step outside. The moon is full, casting soft silver shadows across the garden. 2 lamps glow in the window. You think maybe it's time to add a third. You light it and let it shine. 3 lamps now. You never meant to start a pattern, but the light seems to say what words can't. 1 lamp. We're here. 2. We have room. 3. Come in, you are not alone. And they do come, not every night, but often enough that you keep the wash basin ready and an extra pot of soup on the stove. The house swells and shifts with each new arrival, like a lung taking in breath after breath. Some girls stay for weeks, others just a night. No one stays forever, but none leave unchanged. You grow skilled in reading footsteps. You know the difference between a nervous shuffle and a confident stride. You can hear hesitation in the way someone knocks. You can guess how long they've been walking by the way their shoulders curl inward from the cold. One girl arrives barefoot. She doesn't say her name for 3 days, just curls up in the corner and watches the dog with wide eyes like she's waiting for it to bite. It doesn't, of course. He just lies beside her and sighs occasionally, as if to say, "You're safe now. Take your time." Eventually, she gives a name. June. Whether it's hers or one she's borrowed doesn't matter. It's hers here. June stays for a while, helps with laundry, learns to sew a straight seam. One day she asks to repaint the pantry. "The walls feel heavy," she says. So you let her. She chooses a warm yellow. By the time she finishes, the room looks like a sunbeam has taken up residence in the shelves. You catch her dancing there once, just a little spin, a soft smile, a moment of remembering who she was before everything cracked. You say nothing, just hum along. Historians still argue whether homes like yours were microcosms of progress or nostalgia. Some view them as stops along the way toward real systemic change. Others say they were holdouts of an older world, one where women quietly patched what society preferred to discard. But you think that's missing the point, because it was never about the system. It was about the girl standing in your doorway at dusk, her hands shaking as she asked, "Is it okay if I just sit here a while?" And you said yes. You always say yes. A quirky detail from that time. In some towns, women wrote anonymous notes of encouragement and tucked them into books at libraries, or left them on church pews, knowing other girls with secrets, might find them. Things like, "You are still worthy," or "There's a place for you yet." Little breadcrumbs of hope left by those who had already walked the forest. You begin to do the same. You slip notes into coat pockets before girls leave. You write them in the margins of recipe books. You're stronger than the worst thing that happened to you. Someone out there needs your story. You don't sign them. You don't need to. One afternoon, Lily returns from town with a new sewing machine, second-hand but clean, still in its original crate. "A gift," she says, "from the midwife. She heard about what you do." You run your hand over the smooth wood. The dog noses it too, as if approving. That night, you teach Maren how to use it. She's clumsy at first, mutters curses under her breath, but you guide her hands, slow and steady. By the third attempt, the stitches are clean, straight. You stand back and watch her grin. It's the first time you've seen her proud. And just like that, another thread is tied. The house is busier now, louder. At any given time, someone is baking, someone is crying, someone is sweeping. It's chaotic, it's exhausting, it's alive. You take your tea in the garden when you can. The bench Thomas built is sturdy, and the lavender bush beside it has grown thick and fragrant. You sit there with your notebook and write tiny observations. June made soup. She added too much pepper, but everyone said thank you anyway. Lily's baby giggles when the wind blows. Maren sings again, loudly now. And then you write, "I think I'm not afraid anymore," because you aren't. The shame they tried to build into your bones has softened. The pain you once carried alone is now shared, dissolved in 100 whispered stories and 1,000 pots of tea. One morning, a letter arrives addressed only to the woman with the lamps. You unfold it with careful fingers. Inside, "I passed by your house 2 years ago but didn't knock. I wasn't ready, but just seeing that light made me believe I might still have a future. Thank you." No signature. But you hold the letter to your heart and let the tears come. Not from grief, from gratitude. Because now you know what they meant when they said, "A home is not a place. It's a light left on." And you intend to keep yours burning. The light draws them still. One girl arrives under moonlight, soaked to the bone, her boots squelching with each step. You open the door before she even knocks. She flinches, then cries. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears that slide down cheeks too numb to notice. You bring her in, sit her by the stove, hand her tea before she asks. Her name is Elsie. 17, says she came from 2 towns over, says she followed the lamps. You glance out the window. The third lamp sways a little in the wind. Its flame holds steady. You learn her story slowly. She was promised to a boy from church. Older, respectable. Her father said it was an honor. The boy said it was love. But when she turned up pregnant, he said she was confused. Her father said she was a disgrace. So she walked 12 miles in the dark with nothing but a shawl and a prayer. Thomas finds her better boots in town the next day. Maren helps mend her coat. Lily brings Clara, who promptly drools on Elsie's skirt. It makes her laugh, the kind of laugh that's half sob, half surrender. Elsie stays for a month, long enough to sleep through the night without clutching the blanket like armor, long enough to braid June's hair, long enough to start humming when she hangs the laundry. Then, one morning, she says, "I think I can go back. Not home, somewhere else, but I think I can go." You help her pack. You press one of your quiet notes into her bag. You don't owe anyone the version of you they remember. She hugs you before she leaves. Tight, fierce. Then steps off the porch with a new stride. You watch until she's a speck on the road. Then you light the lamps again, because someone else will need them soon. A fringe fact, by 1900, some early social workers, called friendly visitors, began documenting cases of unwed mothers. They often used cold language, immoral, fallen, ruined. But what those women actually needed wasn't a visitor. It was a place to sit, a hand to hold, a bowl of soup without a side of judgment. And that's what you give. The days fold gently into one another now. Lily begins teaching Clara to walk. Maren starts writing her own notebook. You catch her once, scribbling fast, brow furrowed. She tries to hide it. "Don't worry," you say. "We all need somewhere to put the hard things." One afternoon, you find a letter on the porch, not mailed, just tucked under the flower pot. It's from your mother. You recognize the careful, slanted handwriting. You haven't seen it in years. You read it, sitting on the garden bench, with the dog asleep beside you and the wind fussing the laundry line. Dearest, I heard about your house. I don't know if I understand it. I know I didn't understand you. I know I said things I regret now. If this letter finds you, know that I think of you every day. I pray for you. And if you ever want to write, I'd like that. Love, Mother. You fold the letter slowly. Set it in your lap. Breathe. You're not sure yet if you'll write back, but the letter doesn't hurt, and that in itself feels like grace. That night, you cook extra soup, just in case. The girls set the table. Lily hums a tune you recognize but can't name. Maren lights the third lamp. June starts to tell a story from her childhood, but breaks into giggles halfway through. The dog barks once, then goes back to snoring under the stove. You pause at the threshold before joining them, just for a moment. You look at this room, this mismatched, imperfect, sacred space, and you realize something. This is your cathedral. These are your hymns. You've built a sanctuary from cast-offs, shame, and threadbare cloth. And it holds. It holds. Later, after everyone is asleep and the house settles into its nighttime hush, you sit by the window with your notebook. Tonight, you write only one line. Sometimes what they called disgrace was really just devotion, and you let that be enough. Spring becomes summer, and the house expands with a warmth. Windows stay open longer, curtains flutter like gentle breaths, and the scent of rosemary and wild thyme drifts through the rooms like a lullaby. Everything feels slower now, softer, like the world has loosened its grip just enough for people to exhale. You start keeping a pitcher of lemon water by the door. It always disappears by mid-morning. Someone, usually Maren, refills it without being asked. The house has grown a spine of its own, a rhythm you no longer have to orchestrate. It runs on care and quiet gestures, the things no one writes down but everyone feels. One day, Clara toddles across the kitchen with her arms outstretched and her face determined. She's still unsteady, swaying like a branch in wind, but she makes it to your chair without falling. You scoop her up and kiss her forehead. "She walked to you first," Lily says, eyes gleaming. "She knew I had a biscuit," you reply. Everyone laughs, even the dog. That night, you add a new note to your book. "She walked toward me, and I didn't fall apart." You wonder what Clara will remember of this place when she grows. The lamps, the singing, the way her mother's voice always softened at bedtime. Maybe none of it. Maybe all of it. But you hope, fiercely, quietly, that she'll carry the feeling of safety wherever she goes. One morning, you receive a knock at the back door. It's not a girl this time. It's a woman. Early 30s, maybe. Clean dress, tired eyes. She introduces herself as Margaret, says she's heard of the house, says she doesn't need shelter. She wants to help. "I used to be like them," she says. "No one took me in. I had to crawl out on my own. But now I can bake. I can sew. I'm good with crying babies." You look at her for a long moment. Not with suspicion, but with something gentler. Recognition. You step aside and let her in. Maren eyes her warily at first. Lily offers tea. June insists on showing her the lemon tree sapling she's growing in an old bucket. It's Margaret who finally gets the dog to sit when she says stay. That's the real test anyway. By evening, she's earned her own chair at the table. A quirky note from the history books. Some unwed mothers in the early 1900s went on to become wet nurses, nannies, midwives, or cooks, roles often adjacent to care, but socially acceptable again if placed behind someone else's name. It was as if the world would only forgive them if they promised to help others, but never center themselves. Margaret doesn't want the spotlight, but she does want purpose. And here she finds it. She bakes her first loaf the next day, perfect crust, no shame. That evening, as you light the lamps, she watches. Why 3? She asks. You tell her the truth. 1 means someone's home, 2 means there's room, 3 means we've done this before. She nods, then says, you should add a 4th when someone's ready to go back into the world. You pause. You hadn't thought of that. The next morning, Maren is waiting at the porch, coat on, bag packed. She's not crying. She's glowing in that quiet, resolute way people do when they've made peace with their scars. I found a room in town, she says, a real one, with wallpaper and everything. You nod, already knowing. You hand her a basket of bread and apples. You press a note into her hand. You're not leaving, you're blooming. And when she hugs you, tight, chin trembling, you don't try to hold her back. That night, for the first time, you light a 4th lamp. It's smaller than the others, but brighter somehow. A signal not just of safety, but of strength. The next day, June stands by the window and says, one day I'm going to light my own lamp. Somewhere else. And it'll mean the same thing. You believe her, because this isn't just a house anymore. It's a seedbed, a bridge, a blueprint, and you're not the girl with the secret anymore. You're the keeper of the lights, the one who stayed, not because she had to, but because others still needed a place to start. The 4th lamp becomes tradition. It's not lit every night, not yet. But when it is, it shines like a soft trumpet call, quiet and proud. It means someone is ready. Someone who arrived wrapped in silence and left with their head high. Someone who walked through shame's long shadow and came out soaked in their own name. It becomes a celebration of sorts, nothing formal. No streamers or cake, but always bread, always tea, and always a small gift. A hand-stitched handkerchief, a charm for a ribbon, a note tucked deep into a coat pocket to be discovered days later. You write them carefully, always by candlelight. You are not who they said you were. Leaving doesn't mean forgetting. You can build joy without permission. Each girl gets one. Some frame them. Some keep them hidden. Some leave them behind when they go. But you never take it personally. Healing doesn't always want to be carried. Sometimes it wants to be buried deep and left alone. Summer deepens. The garden thrives in its messy way. Peas burst out of their pods, tomatoes ripen into warm little suns, and bees hum their low, secret songs from blossom to blossom. The house buzzes too. Lily reads aloud while Clara naps. Margaret organizes the sewing supplies into jars, then reorganizes them a week later because they weren't quite right. June paints the porch railing. You notice she's added tiny yellow daisies in the corners. Quiet rebellions against the dullness the world tried to wrap her in. One girl, Annie, starts a journal in the back of a discarded almanac. I write down lies people told me, she says, and then I rewrite them as truths. You ask her what she's written so far. She reads one aloud. They told me I ruined my life, but what they meant was I ruined their idea of who I was allowed to be. You blink, slowly, then say to put that one on the wall. And she does. In the hallway, near the lamps. A fringe historical detail. In some women's shelters of the 1900s, residents carved initials or tiny symbols into the undersides of furniture, silent marks of having passed through. These carvings often remained long after the girls left, ghost messages for the next generation. I was here. I survived this too. You let the girls do something similar. You hand out small brushes and say, if you want, paint something on the back of a door or under a shelf, something only you will know is there. No one speaks. But over the next few weeks, the cottage fills with secret murals. A flower in the back of the pantry, a crescent moon behind the broom cupboard, an open eye above the cellar stairs. And, in your own room, you discover one afternoon, tucked behind a curtain hem, a sun with Clara's name in curling letters. You touch it lightly. The world outside still hasn't changed much. You still hear whispers when you go into town. The occasional shopkeeper who won't meet your eye. The women who wrinkle their noses when they pass. One even mutters, All those girls under one roof, and what kind of example is that? You smile sweetly and reply, the kind that doesn't shatter. Thomas hears about it later and simply says, you're not the example, you're the alternative. You write that down too. The dog is slowing now, his steps are stiffer, and he sleeps longer in the sun. You watch him more closely, you pet him more often. He's been here through it all, through your silence, your return, the first girl who knocked, and every night you weren't sure what would come next. You start carving a little bench near the rosemary patch, for him, for memory, for anyone who needs a seat in the shade. When the girls ask what it's for, you say, for resting, we all need a place to pause. Annie adds, even light needs a shelf sometimes. You smile, and you let her paint the legs a quiet blue. You don't ask what the colour means. Some things are best kept between a girl and her healing. Margaret bakes more now. She's experimenting. Apricot scones, molasses pies. She flung the spoon across the room the other day because someone added too much clove. She apologised afterward. You all forgave her, mostly because the next batch was perfect. The house has changed in its texture. It is no longer the place you fled to years ago. It is the place people now find themselves in. You are not that girl anymore, staring at a cracked ceiling, wondering how the world could be so cruel. You are the woman who hands out teaspoons of hope like sugar. You are the one who reminds people you were never broken. You were just unfinished. That night, someone new arrives. She doesn't knock. She just stands near the porch light, clutching a coat that isn't hers. When you open the door, she stares. You don't ask who she is. You just say, would you like to come in? She nods, and behind you the hallway stretches warm and golden and wide enough for every story she carries. She tells you her name on the third day. Ruth. She's quiet, older than most, maybe mid-20s. There's a steadiness in her movements, a kind of calculated grace, like she's used to being watched and judged and carrying on anyway. She doesn't flinch when Clara cries. She doesn't panic at thunder. She sits by the hearth with a book and a stillness that almost feels like waiting. You don't press her. You've learned not to. People unfold when they're ready. Instead, you place a folded quilt on her bed, a mug of mint tea on her table. You show her where the spoons live and where the flowers bloom fastest near the garden wall. You invite her to sit by the rosemary bench in the mornings. She accepts none of it, at first. But by the end of the week, the quilt is draped over her knees, the teacup is rinsed and returned, and one evening she joins you at the bench without being asked. The dog rests his chin on her foot. She doesn't move it. That's how you know she's starting to trust the quiet. Ruth finally speaks late one night. Everyone else is asleep. The house creaks gently, settling into its bones. You're folding linen napkins, something mindless to keep your hands moving, and she steps into the kitchen like a shadow with something important to say. I was married, she begins. He died, and they said I'd already had my chance at life. You pause mid-fold. I didn't even get to choose the first time, she adds, voice low. Now I'm choosing something else. You nod, not because you understand all of it, but because you respect it. She stays for 2 months, doesn't ask for comfort, just works. Helps fix the rain barrel, prunes the fig tree, keeps track of who needs boots mended and which girls seem to be losing their appetite. She doesn't tell you she's pregnant until the first kick. You don't gasp. You just nod and ask if she'd like soup. She does. She sits at the kitchen table that evening with her hand on her stomach, as if she's holding something already trying to leave. And you say, you're not stealing life, you're making space for it. Ruth looks up. Her mouth trembles once. And then she says, they called me barren, as if I was soil they'd already tried to plant in and given up on. You take her hand. Let's call you a greenhouse instead. All you needed was warmth. That becomes your new favourite metaphor. You write it in your notebook that night. Some of us aren't barren. We were just growing under the wrong season. Historians still debate whether widowed women who became pregnant outside of remarriage faced more stigma than unwed girls, or less. It seems to have depended on town, family, gossip scale, and who had the loudest voice in the local church. But for the woman, the outcome was almost always the same: exile, whispered shame, and a long walk back to herself. Ruth begins to smile again, not every day, but often enough that you catch it when she forgets herself and laughs at Clara putting mashed peas in her own shoe. Or when Margaret insists on teaching everyone how to make peach preserves and sets the entire kitchen smoking. She even joins the painting tradition. You don't know what she's chosen, but one day you find a tiny crown painted under the eaves in gold, just big enough to hide, just bold enough to gleam when the light catches it. It feels like a promise. Ruth goes into labor on a soft September night. There's no storm, no drama, just candles and water and women moving like threads in a well-rehearsed weave. Margaret brings towels. Lily holds Ruth's hand. You press a cloth to her forehead and hum something wordless. The baby arrives just before dawn, a boy, strong lungs, dark eyes, tiny fists clenched like he came prepared to fight for his place in the world. Ruth holds him against her chest and breathes slow and steady for what feels like forever. No one says anything. There's no need. Some silences are sacred. Later, after the others have gone to rest, Ruth asks to sit by the bench with the baby. You wrap a blanket around her shoulders and walk with her into the dawn. She sits, rocks slightly. "Do you think I can raise him?" she asks, not looking at you. You say, "You're already doing it." And she smiles, a real one, tired but sure. That afternoon, the fourth lamp is lit again. Not because Ruth is leaving, but because she's chosen to stay in her own way, to stop running, to root, to mother. That evening, the girls make cornbread. Someone sneaks too much honey in. You don't mind. Clara tries to feed some to the dog. The dog obliges. Ruth stands by the window, her baby tucked close, watching the lamps glow in the gathering dark. You ask what she's thinking. She says that one day someone will knock and it'll be my turn to open the door. You nod, because yes, one day it will. By mid-autumn, the leaves shift into gold and copper and drift like quiet applause across the yard. You find yourself raking more often, not because the leaves need it, but because the rhythm calms you. The girls often help. Margaret insists it builds character. June just wants an excuse to jump in the piles afterward. You let her. The house holds steady. It has learned how to breathe with all the stories inside it. Sorrow, recovery, laughter, relapse. It holds the past in its walls and the future in its windows. Ruth has settled into motherhood like she was waiting for it all along. Her son, Jacob, rarely cries. Clara toddles around him like a proud older cousin, dropping spoons at his feet as if she's bestowing royal gifts. The dog remains unimpressed, though he has taken to napping under Jacob's cradle, as if self-appointed to guard duty. Each evening, you sit with your notebook and write one sentence, no more. A new ritual, you call it your soul tally. This week's entries read, "Elsie wrote again. She's married now to someone kind. Jacob's laugh sounds like wind through paper." Margaret burned the biscuits but served them anyway. No one complained. You add, "The house feels full but not crowded." A girl named Nadine arrives as October creeps in. She's different, not scared, not grieving, just lost. She was never told what she could want, only what she should accept. Her story isn't loud. It's a slow erosion of self from years of being pleasant, suitable, well-behaved. She speaks softly, always with qualifiers. "If that's all right, I'm sorry to bother. I don't mean to be a burden." You tell her you're allowed to take up space here. She blinks, nods, doesn't speak. But that night she takes a second helping of soup. Progress. Historians still argue whether women like Nadine, those who didn't flee scandal or violence but simply exhaustion, were part of the broader social shift of the early 20th century. The ones who left stifling homes not in disgrace but in pursuit of something more. And even though they weren't in trouble, they were still in need. You understand that more than you used to. Because healing doesn't always follow heartbreak. Sometimes it follows numbness. The quiet kind. The kind no one notices until you've already begun to disappear. You teach Nadine to prune the garden. She listens carefully. Doesn't speak much, but her hands move with growing confidence. One afternoon she turns to you and says, "I didn't know soil could feel this warm." You smile. Neither did I, once. The fourth lamp shines more often now. The bench is used daily. The girls have taken to decorating it with seasonal touches, apples, wildflowers, sprigs of lavender. It's become both altar and picnic table, a place for deep talks and bad jokes and quiet weeping when the world feels too sharp. One night, a girl named Harriet knocks. She has dirt on her face and a bag full of rocks, literal rocks. You invite her in. She places her bag by the fire and says, "I collect them. Each one is from somewhere I shouldn't have made it out of." She pulls one out, grey and jagged. "This one's from the alley behind my school. I hid there the night I ran." Another, smooth, reddish-brown. "This was from the bus station." Another, tiny, chalky, worn. "This one, I don't even remember, but it stayed with me." You don't ask what she wants to do with them. You simply hand her a bowl. "Let's give them somewhere to rest," you say. You place the bowl near the hearth. The others add to it. A feather, a key, a broken brooch. It becomes a small, sacred pile of things once carried through darkness. A reminder of everything survived. June carves a wooden plaque for it. Things we shouldn't have made it through but did. You read it once, then again. And then you add a button from your old coat, the one you wore to Aunt Miriam's, the one that held your shame like a secret. Now, it holds solidarity. A quirky little truth. In a few known women's shelters from the late 1800s, women made memory quilts from scraps of clothing, baby blankets, and handkerchiefs, not to sell, not to display, just to remember. They stitched themselves into something that couldn't be erased. You think of starting one. You'll call it the quilt of becoming, but that's for another day. Tonight, Ruth sits on the porch with Jacob in her lap. Margaret hums while she kneads dough. Clara runs barefoot through the leaves with a squeal of glee. June yells, "Shoes!" and chases after her. Nadine laughs, an actual laugh, and it cracks something open in the air. And you? You watch it all and feel steady. That night, you write your soul tally sentence. This is what reclaiming looks like. You light all 4 lamps, and then you sit back and let them glow. The first frost arrives overnight. You wake to find the windows laced in silver, the garden stiff with ice, and the dog refusing to set one paw outdoors until the sun has done its part. The air bites now, but the house holds its warmth. You built it that way, layer by layer, story by story, until even the walls knew how to hold someone. Inside, the girls move slower in the mornings, wrapped in shawls and thick socks, hands curled around mugs that steam like small cauldrons. Someone's always baking, usually Margaret, filling the rooms with cinnamon and clove. The kitchen smells like memory and healing. Even the dog lingers there longer than he used to. Nadine begins to bloom in small, deliberate ways. She speaks louder now, offers opinions, declares that her favorite color is blue, but only the kind of blue that feels like sky, not sadness. She teaches herself embroidery, stitches tiny, defiant phrases into cloth napkins. Not yours to name? Soft is not the same as weak. I get to stay. She leaves them around the house. You start a shelf just for her napkins. Ruth is more mother than guest these days. Jacob is teething. He chews on everything, including the corner of your old recipe book. You don't mind. That book needed teeth marks anyway. Clara insists on helping feed him, which mostly means placing apples near him and saying, "Here, eat, be strong." He tries. One morning, a package arrives. No name, no note, just a box tied in twine. Inside, blankets, handmade, perfectly folded, a tag on each one, stitched with a single word, safe. You place them on the hallway bench. The girls say nothing, but you notice how they touch the fabric gently as they pass. Each one takes one eventually, though no one says so aloud. It becomes its own kind of ritual. A fringe fact, some women in the early 20th century ran blessing circles in secret, gatherings where they gave each other care bundles, herbs, cloth, food, letters. They called it charity when men asked, but between themselves they called it survival. You start doing the same. Every time a girl leaves now, she takes a bundle, a shawl, a stitched napkin, a biscuit, a button from the memory bowl, a note, yours, always. This week's reads, may you remember that you are not a problem to solve. You begin receiving more letters, not all from girls who've stayed. Some are from townsfolk, a widow who says she's been quietly donating apples, a schoolteacher who wants to send her niece for sewing lessons, even the postmaster's daughter who writes, I used to think I'd be ashamed to end up there. Now I think I'd be lucky. The lamps glow every night now. 1 means you're home. 2 means there's room. 3 means you've done this before. And the 4th, it means someone is ready. Harriet, the rock collector, stands by it one night, hand on the glass. Do you ever think there'll be a 5th? She asks. You turn to her. What would it mean? She doesn't hesitate. That someone made it all the way through. You let that sit. That night, you write your soul tally. Maybe the 5th light is inside them now. Maren writes back from town. She's started a laundry service, calls it Clean Slate. You grin when you read that. She's taken in 2 girls already. One helps with starching, one sweeps. Maren writes, I tell them what you told me. You don't have to become who they expect. Just who you are. You cry a little. Good tears. You hang her letter on the kitchen wall. That same week, Ruth begins planning to leave. Not because she's running, but because she's ready. She's found a small cabin to rent, a place with a garden and space for Jacob to play. Margaret helps her pack jars of preserves. Nadine stitches her a napkin that says, Stillness is holy too. You write her a letter. Fold it into her coat. This house doesn't end when you leave it. It grows with you. Every room you step into after this, bring your light. Ruth hugs you for a long time. Then she lifts Jacob onto her hip and walks into the frost. You light the 4th lamp, and just before dawn, you light a 5th. Not because someone returned, but because someone no longer needed to. That day, Harriet places a stone on the porch rail. Not from pain, she says. From peace. The 5th lamp stays lit for 3 nights. You don't plan it that way. It just happens. You can't bring yourself to snuff it out. Not yet. There's something about that quiet glow, that silent declaration that someone made it through, that keeps the others leaning toward it like sunflowers. They pass it and pause, gently touching the post, as if drawing strength from its burnished glass. Clara calls it the grown-up light. She points at it every evening with solemn reverence, as if she instinctively understands what it means. You don't correct her. She's not wrong. The girls begin to speak of it in passing. When I get to the 5th, I think I'll plant sunflowers. I want to paint my own door yellow. I'll wear red on the day I leave, just because. And so it becomes more than a symbol. It becomes a goal, a promise that surviving doesn't have to be the end of the story. That joy can come after. That leaving isn't an escape, it's a homecoming too. Margaret starts writing names on slips of paper and tucking them in a tin above the hearth. Each one is a girl who's stayed and moved on. At first, it's just a few. Then it grows. She calls it the Lantern Registry. You love her for it. You begin to bake more. Not because you have to, but because you want to. There's something sacred about flour on your fingers, the scent of cinnamon on the air, the way kneading dough feels like smoothing out grief into something that can rise again. Nadine helps. She's gotten good at folding, precise, gentle, like someone finally allowed to care for something that won't be taken away. One day she places a small cake on your table, just big enough for two. On it, written in careful white icing, "Thank you for staying when they didn't." You don't cry in front of her, but you keep the paper doily it sat on. Later you press it into your notebook and write beside it, "I became the thing I once needed." A new girl comes. Her name is Leah. She doesn't say much, but she writes, constantly. Scraps of paper, back of envelopes, pages torn from books already missing their spines. She writes in corners, in the garden, sometimes with her finger in dust on the windowsill. You ask what she's writing, she shrugs. Not stories, not poems, just reminders. You leave her to it. One afternoon you find a note stuck to the inside of your teacup. You survived the worst days, now let the good ones in. You save it. You hang it on the pantry door. That night, by lamplight, she reads aloud one of her pages. It begins, "They said I ruined everything, but I am still here, with bread in my hands and ink on my fingers, and that counts for something." Everyone claps when she finishes, not loud, just enough. Because here applause is not performance, it's permission to exist, to be proud, to keep going. Historians still argue about whether places like yours challenged norms or simply softened them, whether they opened doors or merely widened the hallways, but they always miss one truth. You made a new blueprint, not for institutions, not for politics, for people, one girl at a time. The fifth lamp flickers slightly on the fourth night. You think maybe it's time, maybe it's ready to rest, but then Harriet appears on the porch, holding a battered suitcase and a smile that's not made of fear. "I found a place," she says, "an old inn near the river. Needs cleaning, needs me." She doesn't stay the night, just long enough to sit by the bench, sip tea, and hug each girl once. She leaves a new rock in the bowl by the hearth, smooth, white, shaped like a heart, but doesn't explain where it's from. You don't ask, you light the fourth lamp, then the fifth. And as she disappears down the road with her coat flapping behind her like a flag, you realize something. This is not a home for the fallen. It's a launch pad. It's a place people land so they can fly again. The girls begin writing dreams on paper. They hang them on the hallway wall. Some are simple. Open a flower shop. Ride a train and not look back. Wear pants in public and not care who sees. Some are quiet. Be called by my real name. Sleep without shame. And some are brave. Fall in love and believe I deserve it. You hang one yourself. It says, "Outlive every lie they told me." And you already are. Snow comes early this year. It starts as flurries, light and indecisive, like the sky isn't quite sure whether to commit. But by nightfall it's falling in earnest. Fat, slow flakes that blanket the roof and hush the world like a bedtime story. The cottage becomes a snow globe. The lamps glow through the frosted windows like tiny hearths floating in a white blur. Inside, everything feels closer, warmer. You add more quilts to the beds, more logs to the fire, more cinnamon to everything. Clara stands at the window in her nightgown, fogging the glass with her breath. "Is it still our house when it's all white?" she asks. You crouch beside her, wrap a shawl over her shoulders and whisper, "It's always ours, even under snow." She thinks about that, then says, "Then we're still growing, just quietly." You press your hand to your heart. "Yes, sweetheart, exactly." Inside, the rhythm shifts. Everyone walks slower. They share more stories. You sit closer, even when the fire is warm. Maren writes from town again, says she's started baking for neighbours, just small loaves. And someone offered to pay. "I didn't say yes," she writes, "but I didn't say no either." She signs the letter, still becoming M. You hang it next to the pantry. Margaret starts knitting again. She makes mittens this time, one pair for each girl, each colour different. No one asks how she chooses who gets which, but somehow every pair fits. Yours are grey with yellow cuffs. You wear them even inside, not for the warmth, for what they represent. Nadine has taken up drawing now. She's quiet about it, but one afternoon you find a small piece of paper slipped under your teacup. A sketch of the house. But not the way it looks from the road. No, this is how it feels from the inside. Cozy, open, full of soft light and warm corners. She's even drawn the fifth lamp, glowing brightest of all. You tuck the paper in your notebook. Right beside it. We are not rescuing. We are remembering who we were before they buried us in shame. One morning, a girl named Elsbeth arrives. Her boots are soaked, her braid is unraveling, and her voice is hoarse from travel. She doesn't ask for anything, just stands at the door and says, "I heard you had room for girls like me." You nod, step aside. She pauses. "What's the cost?" You tilt your head. "Trust. Tea, your name, eventually." She exhales. "That seems fair." Elsbeth doesn't settle like the others. She paces. She keeps her bag packed. She doesn't share much, but she sits for every meal, washes her own dish. And once, when she thinks no one is watching, she sings while stirring soup. A lullaby, in German, you think. You don't interrupt. Historians still argue whether communal living among women, especially women considered ruined or unfit, was subversive or just practical. Whether it offered healing or merely delay, but they rarely mention the bonds forged at shared tables, the safety tucked into a folded blanket, the unspoken pact of "you don't have to be okay today." Because some days, being believed is enough. Elsbeth finally speaks her full name on Christmas Eve. Everyone is trimming branches with scraps of fabric and dried citrus. Clara puts a star made of twine atop the kitchen shelf and declares it our ceiling tree. Elsbeth holds a mug of cider close and murmurs, "It's Elsbeth Ruth Meyer." She says it like she's testing the sound of her own name out loud again. You smile. "Welcome, Elsbeth Ruth Meyer." And just like that, the room expands. But tonight, the snow falls thick and slow. You gather everyone by the fire. Clara falls asleep with her head on Lily's shoulder. Jacob babbles nonsense while chewing on a wooden spoon. The dog snores with his back to the hearth. And someone, not sure who, starts singing, not for an audience, just because it feels right. You all join in eventually, off-key, mismatched, but in harmony just the same. You close your eyes and listen. This is not the life you were told you'd have, but it's the one you built, brick by kindness, beam by bravery. The lamps flicker gently in the wind, 5 of them now, each with its own meaning, each lit by hands that once trembled, and yet still burning. You open your notebook and write just one line. "I do not wish to be remembered for surviving. I want to be remembered for helping others arrive." You tuck it into the spine, then you blow out the candles one by one, except for the one by the window. That one you leave burning, just in case someone else is still on their way. The snow lingers well into January, and everything outside the cottage slows to a hush. The trees wear white coats, the path to the gate disappears beneath drifts, and the sky seems to hang lower than usual, closer, softer, like it, too, is listening. Inside, the world is anything but silent. Jacob has discovered his voice. He babbles at spoons, pillows, the fireplace, and occasionally the dog. Clara insists she's teaching him real words, though her lessons mostly involve reciting the ingredients of cookies in dramatic fashion. Nadine has taken over the pantry. She labels jars with tiny hand-drawn portraits of their contents, a smiling cinnamon stick, a bashful clove, a heroic onion. She says it helps her remember that even small things have faces worth seeing. You don't argue. You like the idea too much. Leah, the note writer, begins slipping lines into people's coat pockets again. This week's gems include, "You do not need to sparkle every day. Some days it's enough to simmer." Wolves howl to find their pack. You're allowed to call out. Your softness isn't a flaw. It's the proof you didn't harden. One ends up in your own boot. It reads, "The first person you forgave was yourself. The others just followed." You sit with that one for a while. By now, the house has become a kind of living archive, a library of second chances and unspoken promises. Each room holds a little more than furniture. There are echoes in the beams, comfort in the door frames, rebellion in the sewing box. Margaret starts making candles, dips them in beeswax, lines them up on the windowsill like soldiers made of gold. Each girl gets one, eventually. "For when you need to remember you're the light," she says. "They're never lit all at once. Each flame has to mean something. Historians rarely wrote about the inner lives of women like you. At best, they noted occupations: laundress, midwife, servant, mother. But the truth is, you were also architects of emotion, engineers of silence, gardeners of grief. You know how to carry weight without dragging it. One afternoon, you catch Elsbeth sketching in the snow with the end of a broomstick. At first it looks like nothing, just lines. Then you realize it's a map, a winding path, a house, 5 lamps, a small, smiling dog. She sees you watching and shrugs. "Just trying to remember how to get back here." You nod, and that night you ask her if she'd consider drawing something bigger, something permanent. She agrees, takes over the pantry wall. By week's end, a mural has bloomed, women gathering water from a well, hands reaching across a table, lamps glowing in windows. At the center, a tree with roots wrapped in ribbons, names stitched onto each one. Clara points at it and says, "That's the memory tree." It sticks. Everyone adds a ribbon eventually, even you. You don't write a name, you just write, "I stayed." One evening, a storm howls hard against the shutters. You gather everyone in the sitting room, fire blazing, tea steaming, blankets piled like fortresses. Margaret reads aloud from a book of old folk tales. Nadine embroiders. Ruth rocks Jacob. Clara asks questions every other sentence, and Leah, without a word, passes each girl a folded note. You wait until they've all opened theirs, then you unfold yours. It says, "This house isn't a place, it's a person. It's you." The room blurs for a moment. You blink. The girls are still there, laughing, living, stitching, singing. You don't need to say anything. The moment says it for you. Later that night, you step outside. The wind has calmed. The snow glitters like crushed stars. The 5th lamp flickers, casting long shadows across the porch. You reach up and adjust the wick. Steady it, let it burn. Then you take out a tiny 6th lamp from the cupboard. It's been waiting. You hang it gently beside the others. It glows with a soft, hesitant light. A beginning. When Leah opens the door behind you, she doesn't ask. She just says, "So, what's this one for?" And you say, "For those who come back, not because they have to, but because they want to help someone else walk through the dark." Leah nods. It's like a torch. You smile. Exactly. And that night, 6 lamps glow over the snow. Each one a story, each one a home. 6 lamps. It's a quiet glow, no brighter than before, but there's a different quality to it now, like the house itself has begun exhaling more fully. A cycle completed, a girl who came, stayed, healed, and chose to return, because Leah does return, not as a guest, not as someone needing shelter, but as someone ready to hold space for someone else. She arrives one Tuesday morning in late February, her coat trailing snow, cheeks pink from the wind, and a stack of notebooks pressed tight against her chest. "I want to help," she says, "and I brought words." Of course she did. You pull her into a hug, not too tight. Just enough to say, "I've been waiting for you." You give her the small bedroom near the pantry, the one with the window that always catches the morning sun. She sets up a desk and places a candle beside it. That night, she scribbles by firelight, and you catch her whispering the sentences aloud, as if reminding herself of the ones that matter. The house shifts to make room for her. It always does. A new girl arrives a few days later. Her name is Alma. She's barely more than a child, 16, maybe 17, though her eyes look older. She doesn't speak much, keeps one hand pressed constantly to her stomach. You don't ask. You make soup, you give her a shawl, and you ask Leah to sit with her. Leah does. No pressure, no questions. Just 2 cups of tea and a notebook shared between them. Eventually, Alma begins writing too. Small words at first, then full sentences, then entire pages. "I didn't think I'd ever be allowed to have a story again," she says, "but Leah said I don't need permission." You smile. Leah's very smart. Leah blushes in the next room. Clara declares Alma her sister now and teaches her how to stack firewood, slice apples, and tell when a biscuit is done enough to eat but not too done to hug. The dog adopts her as his new nap partner, and the house continues. One morning, Ruth returns for a visit. Jacob on her hip, taller now, reaching for everything. She brings fresh eggs and blackberry jam. Nadine cries when she sees her. Margaret insists she stay the night. Clara offers her the good chair, the one with the squish. Ruth walks the rooms slowly, touching the walls like she's reading a book in Braille. "It still feels like a heartbeat in here," she says. You take that as the highest compliment. Historians often miss this part. They record the names of leaders and lawmakers, the dates of reforms, the speeches given on steps and behind podiums, but they forget the small revolutions, like almond-scented biscuits baked while humming, like a girl learning to say her name without apology, like a house that holds 6 lamps glowing in a rhythm no one outside fully understands. A quirky truth? In the early 1900s, some midwives and women's health advocates carried small tokens, seeds, coins, polished stones, to leave in the homes they visited. It was said to bless the house, to mark it as a place where a woman had been seen, known, helped. You find yourself doing the same. Whenever a girl leaves, you tuck a dried sprig of lavender under her pillow. Just a gesture, just a scent. A way to say, you were here, and that matters. Leah finds Alma painting her own symbol on the pantry wall. A dove with wide wings carrying a thread in its beak. She said it's hope, Leah tells you later. But the kind you pass to someone else. You nod. Of course it is. The 5th lamp glows again a few weeks later. Nadine leaves. Not suddenly, not with drama. Just ready. She's found a boarding house that needs a cook. Says she wants to write a cookbook that's really a memoir, but the kind you can eat. Before she goes, she gives you a napkin, stitched with the words, not broken, rewritten. You keep it beside your notebook. That night, you light the 6th lamp too. Because as she disappears down the snowy road, you know she'll be back. Not because she must, but because this place doesn't end at the gate. It follows her, lives in her, moves with her footsteps like an echo that hums, "You were safe, you were loved, you were enough." The next morning, Alma sits beside you at the table. She's still, thoughtful. Then she says, "Do you think I'll make it to lamp 5? You pause. "I think you already have the light in you." She nods slowly. "I want to carry it forward, like Leah, like Ruth, like you." You reach across the table, take her hand and say, "You will, in your own time." She squeezes back. Outside, snow melts in soft patches. Inside, the 6th lamp glows, and you write in your notebook, "What began as refuge is now a garden." The door never closes. The roots grow in every direction. By March, the ice loosens its grip. You wake one morning to the sound of dripping, slow, steady, like the world exhaling after holding its breath for months. The snow shrinks back, revealing muddy earth, green shoots, and forgotten tools left leaning against the garden fence. Winter isn't gone, not yet, but it's lost its edge. Inside the house, something similar happens. The air feels lighter. The girls begin cracking windows again, letting in sharp gusts that smell of thawed soil and wood smoke. Quilts are folded and stored, socks are shed. Clara runs barefoot across the kitchen tiles, laughing and shrieking while the dog chases her in lazy, looping figure eights. Alma begins humming. You don't even notice it at first. Then, one morning while she's peeling potatoes, it spills out, a small melody, aimless and pretty, like a bird testing its voice after too long in silence. You catch her mid-hum and raise your eyebrows. She freezes, then blushes. "I didn't mean to." You smile. "Don't stop." She doesn't. Later, Leah joins her, adding harmonies as if they've done this for years. The kitchen sings. That week, you write in your notebook, when two girls hum in harmony, the roof beams remember joy. Margaret begins teaching Alma how to bake. They start with easy things, muffins, shortbread, cornbread that crumbles too soon but tastes like home. Alma frowns when her crusts sag, when her biscuits flatten. "I was never good at much," she mutters one afternoon. You lean over the table and whisper, "That's a lie someone gave you, give it back." She blinks, then smiles a little. And the next batch of muffins rises tall. Another new girl arrives, Hazel. She's older, nearly 30. She carries herself like someone who's been both battlefield and soldier. Sharp, cautious eyes, hands that twitch when she's still too long. You welcome her in, offer tea. She doesn't drink it, just holds the cup like a shield. "I'm not like the others," she says quietly. "I don't cry. I don't fall apart." "That's fine," you say. "You don't have to fall apart to need rest." She considers that, then asks for more tea. Hazel doesn't join in at first. She keeps her boots on inside, eats standing up, sleeps with the lamp burning. But you've seen this before. Girls who weren't given permission to soften, girls who confuse strength with silence. She joins Clara's game one morning, pretending to be a dragon. She roars once, half-heartedly, and Clara throws herself onto the rug in gleeful surrender. Hazel freezes, then bursts out laughing. It's the first time you see her teeth. That night, she sits by the fire with the others. No one mentions it. That's the rule. Healing doesn't like spotlights. Leah begins drafting a small book, a collection of all the girls' best sentences, stitched together like a patchwork. She calls it The Lamp Keeper's Journal. You raise your eyebrow when you see the title. She grins. It's not about you, it's about us. You pretend to be offended, but you're proud, deeply. She reads aloud from it at dinner. "We aren't returning to who we were. We're becoming who we never got the chance to be." Everyone claps, except Hazel, who nods once, her version of applause. That evening, Alma asks to light the fifth lamp. You hand her the match. She cradles it like something sacred, then steps out into the dusk. She lights the lamp. She stands a moment, looking at the glow. Then she whispers, "For the girl I was, and the one I'm becoming." You don't ask what she means, you don't need to. Inside, Margaret bakes celebration bread. Cinnamon and sugar, crusted. Sweet and warm. You save a piece for the bench. Because the bench has become part of the ritual now. Every time someone lights the fifth lamp, they sit on it alone for a moment. Just to breathe. Just to remember. Just to say, "I made it." And every time, someone else quietly joins them after, never to talk, just to be near. You add a line to your notebook. Even victory needs a witness. That spring, something new blooms in the garden. Wild violets, unplanted, unexpected. Clara insists they're magic. You decide not to correct her. You plant more herbs. You patch a roof tile. You wipe Jacob's drool off your apron with practiced ease. You kiss a skinned knee. You write another line. This is not the life I imagined. It's better. It's earned. Hazel begins sleeping with her boots off. She bakes a pie. And it's terrible. But everyone eats it anyway. Because here, even the burned edges matter. Spring pushes harder now. The trees outside are no longer bare. They bristle with the blush of new leaves, soft and unsure, like the first brave words of a girl not used to being heard. The garden surges with green, parsley chives, wild mint that's already threatening to take over the fence line. The air smells like earth and sun-warmed wood. The porch creaks when you walk across it, but not from age, from use. The house is full, not crowded, just complete. You've had seasons like this before, periods when every bed is filled, every teacup used, every voice layered into the daily music of the place. But this one feels different. It doesn't feel like holding your breath. It feels like breathing together. The girls organize a skills week. It starts as a joke, Clara suggesting everyone take turns, teaching grown-up things. But it sticks, and soon the calendar is covered in messy handwriting. Monday, Hazel, how to patch a leak and trust your own hands. Tuesday, Leah, how to write your future in 3 sentences. Wednesday, Alma, biscuit failures and redemption. Thursday, Margaret, candle safety and radical calmness. Friday, you, how to hold a story without fixing it. You hesitate at first. What is your skill? You don't have a diploma. You don't have credentials, just calloused hands and a house that hasn't fallen apart. But then you remember you've been listening for years. That is a skill. You write it on the chalkboard in Clara's pink crayon. How to stay while someone speaks. Friday comes, the girls sit in a loose circle in the parlour. You don't lecture, you simply say, most people listen to reply, we listen to hold, that's different, that's enough. Then you invite silence and let it fill the room like sunlight. No one speaks for a full minute. Then Alma does, a short story about the first time she was told she wasn't smart enough. Then Leah. Then Hazel. Each voice finds its own shape. You write in your notebook that night. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is stay when someone is telling you the truth. Hazel comes to you that evening with a question. I've been thinking about starting something, a place like this, not exactly the same, but similar. You raise your eyebrow. A refuge? She nods. More like a lighthouse. She hesitates, then adds, would that be copying you? You smile. It would be honoring me. She lights the 5th lamp 2 days later. You let her. She doesn't sit on the bench. She stands, arms crossed, facing the field. Then she turns and says, this isn't the end of anything, just a shift. You nod, then go and shift the world. She hugs you, quick, fierce. And when she walks away, she doesn't look back. Clara says, I think she's going to be famous. Maybe, you say, but that's not the point. Margaret begins drawing blueprints, real ones. She says she's planning a kitchen big enough to hold 12 people and at least 1 dancing child. Leah adds footnotes in the margins. Make sure it has 3 windows, she writes. 1 to look out, 1 to let light in, 1 just to know it's there. You decide to add a window to the pantry just for that last reason. Alma finds an old ledger in the back of the cupboard. She wants to turn it into a record of arrivals. No dates, no judgments, just names, or chosen names, symbols, doodles, a kind of anonymous permanence. The first page reads, we were here, and we mattered. Clara colours in the margins. You hang the book by the front door, beside the coats, and dried herbs and wind chimes made from old teaspoons. It makes a soft music every time someone enters. You bake cornbread that evening, not because anyone is leaving, but because someone is always becoming. Later you sit by the 6th lamp. It's flickering slightly, needs a new wick. You adjust it, then sit with your palms warm from the flame. You look at the house from the outside for a moment, at the sagging roofline, the leaning garden fence, the smoke curling from the chimney. It's not perfect, but it is whole. And so are you. You open your notebook, write, this is not a shelter, it is a seed. Every girl who leaves carries a forest inside her. You pause, then write one more thing. I'm still growing too. You close the book, then you rise, walk to the door, and let the next girl in. The next girl's name is Ivy. She arrives just after sunset, hair tangled, coat too thin, shoes muddy, and 2 sizes too big. She doesn't knock, just stands near the 6th lamp, with one hand on the porch railing, as if weighing whether this place is real or just another rumour made of kindness and wishful thinking. You open the door and say nothing. That's the custom now. She looks up. Her eyes are red-rimmed but clear. I don't know what I'm doing, she says. You nod. That's exactly the right way to start. Inside, the fire crackles. Alma is helping Clara draw constellations on the wall with chalk. Leah's reading aloud from a new page in the lampkeeper's journal. Margaret has just pulled something apple-scented from the oven. No one turns when Ivy enters. No one stares. But someone sets out an extra spoon. Someone adds one more scoop to the pot. Someone shifts slightly to make room on the bench. You watch Ivy notice all this, and you see the moment her shoulders lower, just a bit. That night, she doesn't speak much. She eats slowly, she asks no questions, but she refolds her napkin before leaving the table. That tells you everything. You find her early the next morning, barefoot in the kitchen, staring at the mural in the pantry. Her fingers trail along the painted tree roots. "Who painted this?" she asks. "Elsbeth." "What does it mean?" You shrug. "Whatever you need it to." She stares for a while longer. Then she whispers, "I'd like to add something." You hand her a brush. She adds a single green shoot curling upward from the base of the roots, then steps back and nods once, as if to herself. In the coming days, Ivy settles like dew, quiet, consistent, always arriving in the corners of moments. She doesn't tell her story, but she begins helping, folding laundry, untangling Clara's hair, fixing a broken hinge on the back door without being asked. Hazel writes a letter. You read it aloud after dinner. "I thought leaving would be the scariest part. But the scariest part was realizing I had value even before I left. Tell the next girl that. Tell her she's not a before and after. She's enough right now." You do. You tell Ivy exactly that. She doesn't respond, but the next day she draws a tiny green heart on the pantry wall. The heart stays. You spend a long afternoon sorting old things in the attic. You find scraps of fabric, old notes, a baby shoe, a ribbon someone once tied around a goodbye loaf. You bring them down and lay them out on the big table. The girls gather around, touching each piece like a relic. Leah suggests making a memory banner stitched together from remnants of girls who have passed through. She calls it the thread line. Alma sews the first seam. Margaret makes tea. You stitch a scrap of your old coat into the banner. The one you wore when you first arrived at Aunt Miriam's, the one with the torn pocket and the shame stitched into every hem. Clara adds one of her socks. Not because she's leaving, just because she wants to be part of it. Later that evening, Ivy approaches you in the garden. It's chilly, but the rosemary still stands tall. You're pruning gently, letting the scent rub into your fingertips like a balm. She says, "I think I'll stay a while." You nod. "We hoped you would." Then she adds, "And I think I might want to help the next girl." You pause, then say, "When you're ready, the 6th lamp is yours." She smiles, small, honest, like the first crack of spring from beneath snow. That night, you light the 5th lamp because someone is healing, and you add a second flame to the 6th because someone is beginning to guide. In your notebook, you write, "I used to think this house saved girls, but now I see it helps them remember they were never lost to begin with." The mural grows, the thread line lengthens, the lamps glow steady, and the door stays open. Because even now, even with all that has passed and all that has bloomed, someone else is out there, still walking, still hoping, still searching for a porch with 6 lights, and the woman inside who knows just how to say, "Come in, we've been waiting for you." The porch steps creak again. You glance up from your tea and know it's time. Another girl, another weight in the air, delicate but distinct, like the moment right before a thunderstorm breaks or a song begins. This one stands just beyond the gate. Her arms are crossed, chin tucked, a suitcase beside her that's more scuffed than full. She isn't crying, she isn't running, she's just deciding. You don't move. This has become your own quiet ritual, offering stillness instead of invitation, letting her make the last step alone. Eventually she does. Her name is June. She steps onto the porch and says, "I'm not who you think I am." You say, "Good, I stopped guessing names a long time ago." She doesn't laugh, but her shoulders twitch just once. You lead her inside. The house receives her like breath. No fanfare, just warmth. A mug pressed into her hand, a blanket draped across the arm of her chair, a glance from Alma, a nod from Ivy. Leah pointing silently toward the rack of clean towels as if to say, "You already belong." That night, June doesn't speak. She eats a full bowl of soup, takes 2 slices of bread, and leaves a tiny, neat note folded on the corner of the kitchen table. It reads, "Thank you for not asking." You tuck it into your notebook between pages that still smell like dried lavender and spilled ink. The next morning she helps wash dishes. And the day after that, she kneels in the garden with Alma, learning to spot weeds from seedlings. She works methodically, her brow furrowed, not afraid of dirt under her nails, but uncertain if she's allowed to find peace in it. Leah passes her a trowel and says, "It's okay to plant something before you know how it ends." June nods. Doesn't respond, but stays. The pantry mural gains another element, a pale blue line that spirals upward like smoke or breath. She adds it quietly, at dusk. Clara calls it sky string. You don't correct her. That week a package arrives, not from a girl, but from a woman, a former guest, long gone. Inside, a bundle of soft yarn, a handwritten recipe, and a note that simply says, "You changed my ending." You hang the note in the stairwell, right above the creaky 3rd step, where everyone eventually pauses. One evening, during candle hour, Ivy shares something. She says, "Before I came here, I was convinced I could only ever be a warning like a don't end up like her. But now I think, maybe I can be a map." June looks up, and something changes in her face. Hazel writes again. This time she sends photos. Her own house now, smaller but similar, a porch light she wired herself, a wooden sign carved with the words, "You're not late, you're right on time." She writes, "Tell the girls they're welcome here too, someday. Tell them they're not alone out there. The net is wider than they know." You read the letter aloud. Clara insists on adding Hazel's house to the mural. It becomes a tiny cottage near the edge of the painted forest, with a cat on the windowsill and birds mid-flight overhead. Later, June taps you on the arm. "I think I'd like to light one of the lamps," she says. "Which one?" "I don't know yet." "That's okay," you say. "They'll be here when you're ready." June begins writing in the ledger. Nothing long, just a name, hers, in blocky print, and a sentence beneath, "I survived more than I should have, and I'm still soft." You want to frame that. Instead, you memorize it. The next evening, June adds another line to the pantry wall, a small white blossom with gold dust in its center. It glows faintly in the lamplight. "Is it finished?" you ask her. She shakes her head. "Nothing here ever is." And she's right. The house is a living thing now. It shifts. It remembers. It grows. It holds your hands when they shake. It sings back when the girls hum. It leans slightly toward the road, like it's listening for the next arrival. You keep your ear to the wind, because you know there's always another girl, somewhere out there, walking. And this time you won't need to say much at all. The lamps speak for themselves. The road quiets for a few days, not silence exactly, just a gentler kind of hush. The house breathes evenly. Dinners are easy, conversations unhurried. Someone finds a bundle of lavender forgotten in the linen drawer. Alma starts making sleep sachets. She tucks one under each pillow without announcement. You find yours 2 nights later and smile in the dark. You think of rest as a kind of rhythm now, not an absence of activity but a deliberate slowness, like choosing a lullaby over a battle cry. Clara learns to whistle. It is shrill, but she's proud and insists on demonstrating it each morning before breakfast. June winces every time, but she never asks her to stop. Instead, she starts playing a quiet counter-melody on the porch with a wooden flute she carved herself. The sounds clash hilariously, then strangely they begin to harmonize, sort of. Leah suggests calling it the Morning Symphony of Minor Chaos. You write it in your notebook. Margaret starts talking about building a new bench. "The old one's fine, you say?" She nods. "But maybe it's time for something more permanent, something rooted." You don't say no. Later, you catch her sketching designs with Clara, who insists the legs should be shaped like tree trunks because that way it'll never blow away. You write, even children understand anchoring. The sixth lamp flickers a bit. Its oil needs refilling. You clean the glass, refill it slowly. Ivy stands beside you, watching. She's my favorite, she says. Who? The sixth one, the in-between one. You nod. She always glows a little softer. Ivy says, that's how I feel now. Not quite new, not quite gone, just lit. You let the silence carry that weight. That night, someone leaves. It's unexpected, but not chaotic. A letter left on the bench, a bag packed carefully. Her name gently erased from the ledger with a soft, steady stroke. Leah finds the note and reads it aloud. I am not running. I'm walking toward. That's new for me. You nod when she finishes. That's all you can do. Clara doesn't cry, but she hugs you tighter that night. Her bedtime question is quieter than usual. Will they remember us? You say, always. Then and we remember them. The girls decide to plant a tree, a real one, out front, to mark all who've come and gone. Margaret suggests a willow. Leah says birch. Ivy votes for wild pear. You suggest, let the next girl choose, so they dig the hole together and wait. The hole becomes its own kind of ritual, a gap with purpose, a space that says, we're not finished here. Days passed. Then a girl appears. She's different, not younger, not older, just different. She introduces herself as Wren. Like the bird, you ask. She shrugs. Not really, I just like the sound. You offer her tea. She declines, then changes her mind halfway through the kettle's whistle. That tells you a lot. Wren doesn't carry a suitcase. Just a backpack with frayed straps and a tiny sketchbook stuffed in the outer pocket. She notices everything. Points out the chip in the staircase banister. The way the pantry mural shifts colour near the bottom. The smell of rosemary in the garden, even from the porch. She says, I thought it would feel heavier here. You say, it does, but the weight gets shared. Her arrival stirs something, you can feel it. She walks differently than the others, head high, feet deliberate. Not like she's afraid. More like she's been in charge before and isn't sure if she's ready to hand that over. At dinner, she doesn't speak until the very end. Then she says softly, this place has gravity. Everyone nods. That night, she draws a crow in the mural, not perched, flying. Alma asks her to help choose the tree. Wren walks out to the waiting hole. She stares into it for a long time, then says, Rowan. No one questions it. They plant it together. You watch from the porch as dirt covers roots and roots take hold. You write, some girls are seeds, others are soil. Wren is both. The next morning, Wren joins Ivy in tending the sixth lamp. She says, it's good, this light. But it needs a partner. You frown. We've only ever had 6? She points to the pantry mural. Then let's make a 7th there. A painted one, a symbol, for the girls who never made it to the porch. The ones who turned back. The ones who couldn't. The ones still searching. You nod, and Wren begins to paint. Wren's 7th lamp begins as a curve of gold. Not a literal flame, but a suggestion of one, a twist of colour that blooms from the base of the pantry mural like a sunbeam caught just before it fades. She doesn't say what it means. She doesn't have to. Everyone knows. It's a light for the ones still walking. The girls gather around the mural that night quietly. No ceremony, no applause, just stillness. A reverent hush like the moment between thunder and rain. You find yourself breathing slower. You always do when something sacred happens. The house seems to agree. The wind outside goes soft. A dish in the kitchen ceases its quiet clatter. Even Clara forgets to fidget. Wren steps back, paintbrush still in hand. It's for the maybe girls, she says, the ones we hope still find their way. You nod. They're real. Even if they never knock? Especially then. You write in your notebook. The 7th lamp is not for lighting, it is for remembering. That night, Wren adds a single sentence to the ledger. Not under her name, but beneath the space where someone else might one day sign. You're closer than you think. You read it over and over like a quiet mantra. The following days feel full but unhurried. Ivy begins teaching Clara how to sew simple hems. June finds an old recipe in the attic and turns it into a house favourite, rosemary flatbread that burns just slightly at the edges and makes the whole kitchen smell like memory. Margaret finally finishes the new bench. It's solid, weathered oak. The legs look like tree trunks, just as Clara insisted, and when you sit on it, you feel somehow more present. You carve a small heart into the underside, not for sentiment, for anchoring. And every girl who sits there now leaves behind a mark, initials, a doodle, a word that meant something once and might again. The porch becomes its own kind of storybook. Each plank, each creak, each nail a line in a chapter no one wrote down, but everyone remembers. Then one afternoon, a letter arrives, not in the post, just folded beneath the 7th lamp. No name, no envelope, just a sheet of paper that smells faintly like pine and salt air. You unfold it carefully. The handwriting is unfamiliar, but the tone is not. I was supposed to come to your house. I circled the lane 3 times. I never knocked, but I saw the lamps. I saw the girls. And I kept walking. Because I needed to know I could. Thank you for being the destination, even if I stayed on the road. You sit with that for a long time. Then you tape it to the inside of your cupboard door, right beside the faded recipe for buttermilk biscuits. You decide not to tell the girls, not yet. It's something for you to hold. That evening, Wren draws a line from the base of the 7th lamp out toward the mural's edge. A kind of path or promise. Clara asks, "Where does it go?" Wren says, "Everywhere." You light the 6th lamp for the girl who didn't arrive, then the 1st lamp for the girl who might, and the 4th for no reason at all, just because it was starting to get dark. Leah writes a new page in the lampkeeper's journal. She titles it, "When the Porch is a Compass." You flip through the older entries, each one a constellation, each voice a little less afraid than the one before. You realize this isn't just a house anymore. It's a direction, a whisper passed from one tired heart to the next. It's the echo of "You're not alone," carved into soup bowls, thread, and soft porch light. You think of Aunt Miriam again, the way her hands moved when she taught you to knead dough, the way she never asked questions until you were ready to answer them. You smile, because now you're the one waiting by the oven. The roles have shifted, but the rhythm remains. That night, as you drift into sleep, you hear the wind through the birch trees, the creak of the new bench, and the almost silent hum of 7 lamps. 6 real, 1 remembered. All of them glowing, all of them enough. You awaken to rain. Not a storm, just that steady, rhythmic sort that taps on the roof like a patient guest. The kind that makes you want to keep the blankets high and the lights low. You step into your slippers and pad toward the kitchen where the kettle is already warm. June's up early slicing apples for something she won't name yet. Wren hums softly, sketching spirals into the corner of a journal no one else has touched. Clara sleeps in. Even her usual morning whistle is silent. You let her be. Outside, the lamps flicker behind mist, and somehow they seem brighter for it. You open the door anyway, letting the scent of damp earth drift in. Rain smells like a beginning, or maybe a cleaning. Either way, it belongs. Mid-morning brings an odd thing. A man, not old, not young. Nervous in that way men get when they know they're stepping into a place not made for them. His coat is too dry. He's been waiting under the tree line for some time. You step onto the porch and wait. He clears his throat, hat in hand. "I'm looking for someone," he says. Your gaze softens. You say nothing. He continues, She was here. Years ago, I think. Her name was Laurel. You nod, once, slowly. She was, briefly. She said this place saved her. You smile. No, this place reminded her she didn't need saving. He doesn't quite understand. That's okay. He reaches into his coat and pulls out an envelope. Inside is a photo, creased, fading, but unmistakably Laurel, smiling, holding a child. She said to leave this if I ever found it. You take the photo gently. He adds, she said the house might want to see her happy. You want to cry. You don't. Instead, you tape the photo next to the seventh lamp, right on the wall, and below it, you write in tidy script. She made it. We knew she would. The man hesitates. Can I sit? You offer him the new bench. He sits. Only for a few minutes. Doesn't ask for tea, doesn't need to. Then he tips his hat, nods once more, and leaves. No questions, just a pause in the rain where his boots once stood. That evening, the girls gather in the pantry. They stare at Laurel's photo. Clara asks, was she one of the first? You nod. She didn't stay long, but she left her kindness behind. Leah whispers, like compost. You blink, then laugh. Exactly like compost. That night, Wren adds a small painted child beside Laurel's mural shape, arms outstretched, mid-run, face towards something not yet drawn. June says softly, that's hope. You don't speak, just place a hand on her shoulder. Ivy begins knitting again, not scarves this time. Something more delicate. Squares, pale blue, soft yellow, faded pink. When asked what they're for, she shrugs and says, I don't know yet. But I think they'll matter. You write. Sometimes care begins before purpose. A new girl doesn't come, but a letter does. From a convent outside Boston. The envelope is thick, the ink careful. It reads, years ago, you sent us Miriam's recipe for ginger tea. We didn't understand why until one of our own came to us, frightened, trembling, and carrying a scrap of paper with your address. She never made it there. But your tea helped. We thought you should know. You pass the letter around. Clara draws a tiny teacup on the pantry mural. You whisper to no one in particular. The road has its own lanterns. Later, you find the porch bench, filled with initials, carved low, some in awkward capitals, others in delicate loops. And under them all, Wren's newest addition, still glowing. You sit beside it, quiet. You don't need more girls to arrive to know the house is full. You don't need more lamps to recognize the light. You only need the bench, the rain, the whisper of stories that linger, and the deep knowing that whatever happens next, this place will remain. Not because you hold it, but because the girls do, because they always have. It starts with music, not from a radio or someone's humming, but from the attic. A soft, hesitant melody, plucked strings, a little off-key, but tender. You pause at the base of the attic stairs, listening. Clara peeks around the corner. It's Wren. She plays. She found a mandolin. Of course she did. You climb the narrow steps, slowly, not wanting to interrupt. The attic has always been a sort of forgotten threshold, a space between the remembered and the stored. And now it sings. Wren sits cross-legged on a faded rug, sunlight pooling around her like spilled honey. The mandolin is cradled in her lap, and though her fingers fumble over the frets, she doesn't seem to care. I thought it was broken, she says without looking up. Most good things are at first. She smiles, keeps playing. You sit beside her. The floorboards creak politely. You're not trying to fix it, you say. She shrugs, just trying to learn how it sounds when I don't. You write that down. The girls start listening for the attic music. It becomes their soft call to dusk, the prelude to lighting the lamps, baking evening bread, folding the laundry in that dreamy, repetitive way that feels more like meditation than work. Margaret begins sketching again. She paints the porch, the lamps, the bench. Then she paints you. You try not to look. She shows it anyway. It's not precise, But it feels right. You're seated, one hand on the sixth lamp, the other resting on your notebook. There's no face, just the outline of calm. That's what she captures. Stillness without stillness. You tape it to the pantry wall. Clara calls it the lighthouse. You don't argue. The rowan tree takes root. Its leaves shimmer when no wind blows. Its branches lean toward the porch, as if trying to eavesdrop on the girls' laughter. Leah swears it's grown 2 inches overnight. Ivy ties a ribbon to its lowest branch, for wishes that haven't settled yet. That night, a gust of wind tears the ribbon loose. You find it wrapped around the base of the 7th lamp. You take that as a sign. You start a new book, the guest book that's not for guests. Its pages are blank, no rules, no dates. You leave it on the bench, under the seat. The next morning, there's already a poem in it, written in smudgy pencil, anonymous. It reads, "I was not brave when I arrived. I was a bruise pretending to be a peach. Now I am a pear tree, unbothered, blooming anyway." You copy it into your notebook. Then comes the whisper. One of the girls, maybe Alma, maybe June, mentions the idea of building a second bench for travellers, for those who aren't ready to come up the porch but still need a place to rest. You say, "We don't even know who they are." Margaret replies, "We don't have to." So the second bench begins. It's smaller, lower to the ground, placed under the trees, out of the lamplight, but still within the warmth of the house's gaze. You hammer the last nail in at dusk, and then you wait. The next morning, there's a stone on the bench, a smooth one, warm to the touch, no note, no name, but everyone knows what it means. Wren draws the stone onto the mural, not beside the lamps, beside the road. She names it Proof. Evenings become softer. The air smells like peaches and warm books. The girls start calling the pantry the chapel, not out of faith, but reverence. You find yourself waking earlier, sitting on the porch before sunrise, watching the light shift across the 7th lamp's painted flame. And you wonder, what else is possible? Not for the house, for you. Then one day the letter comes from Hazel. Again, she writes, "I've opened a second home. It's not as beautiful as yours, but it's quiet, and 3 girls already know the code for the back gate." She includes a drawing. It's a house, modest, with 7 tiny lights in the window. You tape it beside Margaret's portrait of you. The girls cheer. You write, "We're not the only lighthouse anymore." And for the first time in weeks, you exhale all the way to the bottom of your lungs. You don't mark the day it happens. There's no thunderclap, no announcement. Just the quiet realization, sometime between the morning tea and the second lamp being lit for no reason, that the house has become something larger than itself. It no longer belongs to you. And that's the point. Wren paints a finishing stroke, a thread of golden vine curling up the pantry wall, connecting all the small mural shapes in a loose spiral. The 7th lamp glows at the centre. The painted road stretches further now, past the frame, off the wall, into suggestion. Clara starts calling it the map. Ivy insists the rowan tree has a twin somewhere, across the ridge, maybe for the next house. June carves a phrase into the second bench's underside. You don't see it until much later, but when you do, it stops you mid-step. If you sat here, you were already brave. A new girl comes, you almost miss it. She arrives so quietly, no bag, no shoes, just a notebook clutched to her chest, and the kind of eyes that have clearly learned the cost of silence. You don't speak, you open the door and step aside. She enters. Leah offers her water. Wren offers a quilt. Clara offers a question. "Do you like jam?" The girl nods. Margaret smiles and says, "We'll make more." She never gives her name. No one pushes. But later, in the guest book that's not for guests, a page appears. 3 words in pencil. "Thank you anyway." And somehow it's enough. The pantry mural is nearly full now. The lamps, the paths, the tree. The quiet figures half hidden in watercolour and gold leaf. Each shape a whisper, each curve a kept promise. You ask Wren, "What happens when we run out of wall?" She smiles. We keep painting on doors, on backs of chairs, on the air, and you believe her. That evening, you write one last entry in your notebook. The lamps don't make the house safe, the girls do. The lamps just help them see. You close the cover, set it beside the ledger, and finally, go to bed early. Now dim the lights. The mural fades to a hush. The girls settle beneath their quilts, the kind with threadbare corners and secrets stitched into every hem. Outside, the rowan leans gently in the wind, as if listening for a story that's already been told. The seventh lamp glows quietly, even though it isn't real. The house creaks once, like a sigh. A good sigh, a you did what you came to do sigh, and you rest, not just your body, but your watch, because the next keeper will know what to do, she always does. And now we exhale. Let everything soften, like bread dough rising under a linen cloth. You've arrived at the end, not with a full stop, but with an open window, one that lets in the sound of crickets, the whisper of tree leaves, and the gentle clink of a teacup set back in its saucer. Take one more slow breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Imagine the porch beneath you, wooden planks warm from the sun, the quiet weight of a wool blanket on your knees. Maybe there's a cat curled at your side, or the memory of one, just enough to keep you still. In the garden, someone hums a tune you half remember, the kind your grandmother used to sing while peeling fruit. And the lamps? Oh, they're still glowing, each one a soft, sleepy heartbeat against the dusk. Even the seventh, especially the seventh. Your eyes may close now or not. You may drift or linger in the hush a little longer. It's okay. This story was never about the destination. It was always about giving your breath a place to land. So let it. You're safe here. And should you forget that tomorrow, don't worry. The house will remind you. Sweet dreams.